respectively of each of the two groups of members present, I declare the motion negatived.
Third members' motion, building an inclusive society for all. Members who wish to speak in the motion debate will please press the request to speak button. I now call upon Mr. Leung Yiu-chung to speak and move the motion. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. President, I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. First of all, I'd like to thank the sign interpreters for providing interpretation service for our motion debate. But then, regrettably, for those with hearing impairment, they can only come to this council building, and they would only be able to see the sign language interpretation via the screen here, because all the TV stations or broadcasters have refused to, or have been reluctant to show the sign language simultaneous interpretation service, and as a result, they are not able to watch the TV live broadcast at home. And as you know, for our news coverage on TV, they are also not accompanied with sign language interpretation, and our neighbor Macau has already got it, and still Hong Kong has not got it, and therefore we are lagging behind. Well, without sign language interpretation, that would mean that for people with hearing impairment, they would not be able to know what's happening, and they would also find it difficult to integrate into society. That's obviously a very serious detriment to those with hearing impairment. It is their right, and that would also affect their ability to integrate into society. And obviously, that's against the DDO, that is the Disability Discrimination Ordinance. But regrettably, our administration has been sitting back and doing nothing. And on various public occasions, I've already asked the chairman of the EOC, the Equal Opportunities Commission, to do something about it. But then nothing has been done so far. All right, President, please stay to listen to what I say. In fact, I think National Commission should also consider providing sign language interpretation for our meetings, so that for people with hearing impairment, they would also be able to know the progress of our proceedings. I hope that members will support it, because today we have many friends with hearing impairment. They'd like to know the operation of this council, but then they simply do not have this chance. President, today's motion debate is to ask the administration to set up a dedicated committee to promote and follow up on the rights of people with disabilities, because the administration has not attached importance to their rights. And I'm sure all of you would agree that up till now, for PWDs, they have been very much a forgotten group. And as a disadvantaged group, I think it's been dealt with differently from other groups. They do not just require financial support, they also need to be accepted by the community at large. But then what's surprising is that Hong Kong is an affluent society. We talk about freedoms and liberties, but then for people with disabilities, they have been, some have been staying in bed for 40 years and they have not been able to get out. And for those with hearing impairment, because there is no sign language interpretation, they are not able to go into universities. And also for people with disabilities, because of their financial difficulties, they are not able to procure a breathalyzer at home, and they can only wait for their death at home. So this is a cold and ruthless society. These are all complaints against our government. So what's the value of these people's lives? Of course, I have no intention of labeling them or people with special needs, and also people who need care and love. But then all along I've been of this view that for PWDs, they are not just human beings. Very often they are also able to do what people who with able body can do. But then what they are is that they have the same kind of feelings and emotions as we do, and therefore they are also human beings, and therefore I am of the view that they should be treated equally as their counterparts who are able-bodied. But then, regrettably, this is not what we have been doing, and therefore I have to move this motion debate today. I hope that their rights can be given importance to, so that their rights and fundamental rights can be realized in their daily lives. And the administration should also enforce the spirit of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities so that they can be treated equally, so that they can also be respected. Recently, we have been talking about the rights for the gays, and they should enjoy the same rights as other people or as heterosexuals. But then, have we ever thought about those PWDs? Have we considered and discussed their rights? Well, in 2008, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has come into force in Hong Kong. But then how many people understand this? Well, with regard to our knowledge or understanding of that, we have only been able to understand it through APIs that is broadcast on TV that lasts for several dozen seconds. We are only talking about providing a barrier-free and non-discriminatory environment for them. And very often, the administration has portrayed these people in a very narrow sense as people who are requiring rehabilitation services or other support services, but then they have never really looked at the rights of these PWDs. And the administration might be of the view that through these APIs and also through certain programs, their rights can be realized and people can attach importance to their rights. But then if the administration is not able to adopt a people-based approach or human rights-based approach in its governance, then however many APIs that we do, or however many programs of the wireless world that we produce, we are not able to eliminate discrimination altogether. This is not just about the well-being of PWDs. Actually, we are actually talking about the well-being of people in a community, because to a certain extent, we have people around us who are disabled. And what do we want to do for them? We want them to have a good life. It's not just about their living. It's about bringing them dignity so that they can live with dignity. Moreover, there are many people here, or some members of our society, we age. Inevitably, we will also age. And we might also become incapacitated sooner or later. I'm not trying to say that we'll be like that very soon, but then that's an inevitable fate, and therefore we are doing this not just for them. We are also doing this for ourselves, because when we age, we also need more support, and we are also doing this for our next generation, and therefore we have to attach importance to their rights that they deserve. We should also be thinking from their perspective. We should not be doing this as something out of pity or mercy. I've been moving this motion on the needs of the disabled with regard to public transport, and this year we've been very fortunate because we have been granted this $2 fare concession scheme. But then not everybody is entitled to it, and it can only come into place next year. But then from this we can also see this phenomenon, that is with regard to the rights and interests of PWDs. We are not looking at it in totality. We are just looking at it in a very fragmented manner, and the administration is adopting this band-aid approach. There is no holistic or comprehensive policy to deal with people with disabilities. Yes, we have this public transport fare concession scheme for these people, but then many people are not able to leave their residential care homes, and they are not given proper support in the community, and very often they are faced with a lot of difficulties. They are not able to integrate with society. That's because of our fragmented policies and services. That's why, once again, I'd like to move this motion. I hope that you will attach importance to this. You'll face the problem squarely, and the administration should set up a dedicated committee as soon as possible in order to follow up on this. We have to replace the welfare-based approach or concept with a rights-oriented approach, so that their rights can be given appropriate attention or importance. I think this is a very important time for us to review the fact that we have not fully implemented the UN Convention on the Rights of PWDs. In China, in 2008, they acceded to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the UN Committee has already convened its meeting in September. It also looked at the progress of implementation in Hong Kong, and what's most touching is that, well, for the NGOs and deputations, some 20 of them attended the UN committee, and as a result, the committee has been able to understand how the administration is providing for the PWDs, and to what extent are we able to implement the articles of the convention. With regard to the policies in Hong Kong, the committee raised a number of concerns and recommendations, and in the committee, they used two words to criticize our government's practice. And what is that? And they expressed regret. So as you can imagine, when they express regret, it means that our administration, when it comes to implementing the UN Convention, we have not done our job properly. And precisely because of this, we hope that the administration will attach real importance to this. It will have to think hard as to how it can implement the UN Convention on the rights of PWDs, and we hope that the administration will attach importance to this work. And the committee has also made a number of recommendations. It says that in order to ensure that in various policy areas we are able to implement not just the letter but also the spirit of it, in order to ensure that PWDs will be treated fairly and they'll be able to enjoy their human rights. And we'll have to look at what we've been doing in fighting for the interests of the disabled. For example, the committee suggests that PWD should be allowed to apply for PRH as individuals, so that they do not have to apply as a member of the family. They can also live on their own. And also looking at their condition, their circumstances, and also their financial position, many of them are not able to choose where they live or whom they would like to live with. And the committee hopes that we can attach importance to this problem. And the committee is also concerned about this. That is the Commissioner for Rehabilitation is of a low rank, and as a result, in terms of policy coordination, there are problems. And it's also concerned that the role of the EOC is not clear, and also the powers are not extensive enough, and as a result, the EOC has not been able to safeguard the rights of the disabled. So all these issues at the policy level of the administration, either it has not done adequately, or it has been dragging its feet, and it has been rather lukewarm in implementing those policies. And therefore, we hope that the administration would do away with the past approach of adopting a welfare-based approach. And instead of asking the Labor and Welfare Bureau to do it, we should set up a dedicated committee which will be tasked to implement the UN Convention. I hope that members will support my proposal, and I hope that the administration will take the opportunity to set up the dedicated committee as soon as possible in order to implement and promote the rights of the disabled in order to address their concerns. Thank you.
I now propose the question to you, and that is that the motion moved by the Honourable Leung Yiu-chung be passed. 6 members wish to move amendments to this motion. This Council will now proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the 6 amendments. I will first call upon Dr. Fernando Cheung to speak, to be followed by Wong Kwok Hing, Chen Han Pan, Kwok Ka Ki, Emily Lau, and Michael Teen, respectively. But they may not move the amendments at this stage. Dr. Fernando Cheung. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Leung Yiu-chung for moving this motion on building an inclusive society for all. As the motion says, in 2008, we should have started to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of PWDs. In this convention, it says very clearly that under Article 33, it says that state parties, in accordance with their system of organization, shall designate one or more focal points within government for matters relating to the implementation of the present convention, and shall give due consideration to the establishment or designation of a coordination mechanism within government to facilitate related action in different sectors and at different levels. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung has mentioned this point just now. In our government now, the so-called coordination mechanism is the Commissioner for Rehabilitation under the LW Bureau. That post is ranked at D2, but this person has no power or ability to coordinate other bureaus and departments in the implementation of the convention. Under 33, the second paragraph, it says state parties shall, in accordance with the legal administrative systems, maintain, strengthen, designate, or establish within the state party a framework including one or more independent mechanisms. Pay attention to the word independent mechanisms as appropriate to promote, protect, and monitor implementation of the present convention. When designating or establishing such a mechanism, state parties shall take into account the principles relating to the status and functioning of national institutions for protection and promotion of human rights. And the third point, civil society, in particular persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, shall be involved and participate fully in the monitoring process. This is Article 33 of the Convention. Now, in the mind of the administration, this so-called framework or one or more independent mechanisms to protect and promote this convention, well, we have the Advisory Committee on Rehabilitation, but this is only a consultative committee which has no concrete powers, this RAC, Rehabilitation Advisory Committee. So, President, facing the UN Committee on PWDs, we cannot say we have implemented the requirements of the convention. If you just look at Article 33, you understand that. So the motion is an important one, and in my amendment, I have emphasized that the framework or mechanism should be independent. If it is always for the administration to organize advisory committees, and now you have to go through Ms. Sophia Kao of the Central Policy Unit, who can vet the political correctness of the proposed personnel, then how can we monitor this administration? In the convention, it is said that we have the responsibility to allow civil society, the representatives, and also PWDs to participate. But if you look at the advisory structure of the administration, most of them appoint people in their personal capacity, and these people cannot represent any organizations. So the present system just does not comply with the requirements of the convention. We hope the administration will be committed to implementing this convention. This is not a binding debate, but the convention has legal binding powers. It is an international convention. If you do not follow the convention, then basically you have flouted the law. And of course, in the other amendments, we can see the fair concession scheme, and actually Mr. Leung Yiu-chung himself has mentioned fair concession scheme. Of course, we're happy to see that scheme being launched, but we think this is just something you should do, and you have not done a good job, I'm afraid. Why is it that PWDs under 12 cannot enjoy the benefits? If there are PWDs in one family, then adults can enjoy the $2 concession fare, but the child under 12 would have to pay more than the adult. This is ridiculous. What are you doing? You have strived for this for many years, and yet you have only marked time, and then all of a sudden you launched the scheme without first consulting PWDs and us. And the entire policy did not give merit to organizations which have strived for this for a long time. So even if you have done it, I still like to take you to task. As for other amendments, well, in my amendment, I have mentioned the definition of severely disabled. In terms of the definition of severely disabled, it is very harsh. You have to qualify for the allowance, then you have to face this very harsh definition. You have to lose 2 limbs, and in fact you can be quite immobile. And under the allowance now, if you lose 1 limb, you do not enjoy the allowance. This is ridiculous. We can see that if you do not have a leg, and if you are already old, you cannot use a crutch or a walker. And this person will have to be wheelchair bound, and yet when they approach you, you will say that he or she does not comply with the severely disabled definition, and therefore he or she cannot enjoy this fair concession scheme. This is so ridiculous. In other countries and places, not only the disabled enjoy the fair concession, even their carers can also enjoy fair concession. On the mainland, if you take the Lok Ma Chau spur line, you go to the other side of the boundary, you don't have to pay, but it is operated by the same railway company. Given the definition of a severely disabled, Hong Kong is the harshest because you have only looked at this from a medical perspective. You have to lose 2 limbs before you qualify. And also, there are other kinds of disabilities like visceral diseases, like terminal kidney patients. They have to go through dialysis every day. And in fact, the kidney has already failed, but then you do not regard that as severely disability. In fact, this is already regarded as such under international definitions. In 2009, the Ombudsman asked the administration to do a review, and he said that if you lose 100%, you say people have to lose 100% their earning ability before they will be regarded as severely disabled. Now we have about 20,000 PWDs. About half of them enjoy the basic allowance, the other half the enhanced allowance. And many of them actually are working. How can you say that if they are working, you will deprive them of the disability allowance? This is outdated. This is the concept under the Employees Compensation Ordinance that disability must be pegged to work. This has to be cancelled. This is what the Ombudsman said. In 2009, the SWD promised to do a review, but then we still do not see any report. Why is it that you have taken 2 to 3 years and you are still ducking the issue? To many PWDs, they have the need, but you are still depriving them of the assistance they need. Last but not least, I'd like to mention Mr. Chen Han-pen's amendment. Basically, we support the amendment, but then he crossed out the establishment of the dedicated committee, but to only conduct studies on establishing a dedicated committee, and we cannot support that. As for the employment quota scheme for employing persons with disabilities, we support it. We are not asking you to do it right away, but at least government departments have to work by an indicator. We are not saying that there should be a penalty system. We are just asking you to plan for it, and yet you still refuse to do. You have always said that you would give a lot of stall-by work for the disabled, but then you have done nothing to help achieve it. We hope the CY Leung government would really implement his manifesto and to promote employment for PWDs. Thank you.
Mr. Wang Kwok-hing. Mr. Deputy, I'm grateful to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung for moving this motion so that I can move this amendment, and at the same time I can also take this with me. That is the model of the broken leg of Lee Sheng-yang, because I'm fighting for his rights. For many newcomers to this council, they have not seen it. Well, they might think that this looked really very vivid, and this is really quite scary. But then I think what's most ugly is the administration and also the secretary himself. Why? That's because they've been dragging their feet for such a long time, and that's why if you look at the model of Mr. Lee Cheng-liang's broken leg, I'd like to cite from Anita Mui's famous song. So why tell me why? Why you said that in your political platform? You've told us something, and you've been in office for more than 100 days, and still you have not honored your promise. All right, Bureau Director, you are so keen to implement the policies promised by C.Y. Leung. All right, in para 33 or page 33 of his political platform, para 10, this is what he says. For the disabled, he would like to offer the $2 concessionary fare for minicabs and also buses. So there is no mention of the extent of disability, and therefore please do not substitute this with something else. Please do not castrate the idea of C.Y. Leung. And for people who have lost either limbs, they should be allowed to apply for disability allowance. This is very clearly written here in black and white. That's why many PWDs have asked me to put this to the Bureau Director. When are you going to implement this? Why is it that you have been silent on this? Why is it that you have not mentioned it at all? Mr. Deputy, all members, in fact, if you look at Mr. Lee Cheng-liang's plight, well, he has been discriminated against and he has been unfairly treated. And since when has he got such treatment? In 2007, on November the 11th, as a worker working on a barge, he sustained injury as a result of an industrial accident, and he had his leg amputated, and I was in the office, and Mr. Lee Cheng-liang came to a petition with Mr. Chung, who was already the Bureau Director and is 6 years now, and the administration has never given a reply, and the administration has not resolved to tackle this problem. And on the 9th of November last year, in this council, we passed a motion, and that was moved by me. And I was very grateful to all of you for your support, because on that very day, Mr. Matthew Chung, the Bureau Director, at the council meeting, also responded to our motion. And this is what he said. Well, I've brought this with me, and I'm going to read it out to you. All right, this is what he said. In the past, the SWD has worked with the Hospital Authority and the Department of Health with regard to the operation of the Disability Allowance Scheme, and also the guidelines on medical assessment, and also the form and also the flow chart have been improved. In order to further improve the details of implementation, the SWD in later 2009 set up an interdepartmental working group, and it took reference from the recommendation by the Ombudsman in undertaking this direct investigation report with regard to the DA scheme's implementation, and also the Ombudsman's recommendations. There was a review on this, and subsequently, with regard to the judicial review on the DA scheme, it came to an end, and the working group would immediately conduct the review as follows. And it's hoped that by early next year, after the completion of the review, it would come back to the panel on welfare services to give a comprehensive report. This is what he said on November the 9th last year, and today is already November, it's mid-November, and the administration promised that it would come back to this council to report to us the findings of the review. And it's already mid-November 2012, and we only have about 1.5 months to go, and 2012 will be over. Mr. Chung, so for how much longer would you like to delay it? Well, initially, when you dragged your feet, probably I thought you might not be, you might not stay in office after the in the new term. Well, initially, I also thought that I would not be re-elected, but then I'm grateful to the voters in Hong Kong Island. They've returned me to this council, and therefore I'm able to go after you now. So please give us a reply today. Please give us very categorical answer as to the timetable, the roadmap, as to when you're going to submit the paper to us. I've already written to the Welfare Services Panel Chairman, Ms. Chen Yun-han, we will be going after you for the report. And we only have about a month to go. So today's reply should give us an answer. There is no further excuse for you to drag your feet. With regard to the review that you're going to give us, please do not be very vague about it, because we're asking for a comprehensive review. Mr. Deputy, once again, I'd like to quote in the motion debate held on November the 9th last year. I also refer to the direct investigation report by the Ombudsman and also the 8 recommendations that he made after the investigation. And this is what he said. Well, he made 8 recommendations and he asked the administration to comprehensively review the system so that we would be able to do it. And I'd like to say this, number one, the application criteria and also the form of medical assessment should also be revised, and also there should be arrangement for regular review of the cases. And number 4, they should also clarify or clearly delineate the responsibilities or discrepancies between the HA and the hospital authority and also the D of H. And also internal guidelines should be revised, and there should also be a revision to the notification letter specifying the reasons for rejecting the application. And also there should be detailed records of the appeals lodged by the applicants and also the considerations that have been taken on board. And number 8, they should also comprehensively review the DA scheme, including the application criteria or eligibility criteria, and also the doctor and also the SWD's role, and also the assessment mechanism. Mr. Deputy, this is what we said. We are very clear about it. According to the recommendations by the Ombudsman, there should be a comprehensive review of the scheme. And I'm grateful to Ms. Tai Yun-ying and also Mr. Lai Nin. They have come up with this very detailed analytical report. All right, Bureau Director, even if you do not take heed of the advice from this council, you should have taken heed of your fellow colleagues in the government. They have done this very serious investigation, and afterwards they've come up with this with these recommendations. All right, in June this year, we implemented the special concessionary fare for the disabled, but then it's too early for us to claim success, because not all the disabled would be entitled to this, because we're talking about 100% disability before anybody can be eligible for that. And if you're not 100% eligible, then you're not able to get any disability allowance, and you're not able to enjoy the concessionary fare either. And according to the CNS department in 2008, if you look at the number, if you look at PAC's number 48 report, we have 361,000 people with disabilities in Hong Kong, and according to the Central Statistics Office, up to September 2009, for people who have registered with the Central Registry, we have 137,388 PWDs, and for those who have loss of limbs, actually there are some 52,268, accounting for some 32.8% of the total number of PWDs, as they are not 100% disabled. The result is they are not able to get the DA, nor will they be eligible for the concessionary fare. Mr. Lee Cheng-liang was able to get the disability allowance, and he was forced to go to a psychiatrist, and I've already pointed out that he does not suffer from psychosis at all. And this council talk about voting with our hand, and I'd like to vote with this foot or this leg. I hope that the Bureau Director would honor the promise made by C.Y. Leung by implementing this policy, so that for people with disabilities, they'll be able to enjoy the concessionary fare scheme, so that even for people who have lost one limb, they would be entitled to the DA. Please do not make life difficult for them again. If you're not able to do it, please tell us why. Please spell out the reasons. Well, look at this. People who are using prosthetics, can you understand their plight?
Mr. Chen Hanbang. Yes, we need to raise our hands and our feet. I need to stand up to support this motion. I think we're all familiar with the Declaration of the Independence in the United States, that is, everyone is equal. We all want to receive equal treatment. we're all born equal. For those suffering from inherent disabilities or disabilities as a result of injuries, they need to overcome a lot of challenges. For those who are deaf, they need to adapt to the environment. It's still very difficult for them to learn a language. For those who have disabled limbs, they find it very difficult to even walk. But all of them only want to be treated equally in the society so that they can be easily integrated into the community. However, reality is always cruel. It seems to be a cliche, but to a lot of disabled people, physically or this is what they are experiencing. The unfair treatment that they receive, and how they're discriminated against, this is not what normal persons can feel. And therefore, in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that has been enforced in Hong Kong since 2008, the purpose is to strive for the rights of PWDs so that they can be treated equally. Myself and the DAB strongly supports it. The SAR government in 2010 issued the first consolidated report and submitted the report to the UN committee for scrutiny. The report set out the PWD-related policies in Hong Kong and how the government offers assistance to help them integrate into the community. However, if we take a closer look, we can see a lot of flaws in the administration's policies. And therefore, I have moved amendments to the original motion. In relation to the PWD-related policies, I have put forward some improvements. I hope it would be taken on board by the administration. For example, in terms of use of public transport, there are a lot of issues facing the disabled, and they lack community support. Also, they are not treated fairly or equally in the workplace. For these suggestions, other DAB members in due course will speak on them and express our views. Recently, some people expressed their views to me, and on the whole, I think there are three major problems in terms of the administration's policies. First of all, the policies are not implemented efficiently. In terms of the $2 concessionary fare for eligible PWDs, we can see this problem. At present, for children aged below 12, whether they're able-bodied or disabled, they can enjoy the half-fare concession. However, since the introduction of the public transport fare concession scheme, disabled children are required to pay a higher fare. According to the administration, because concessionary fares have already been provided to these children on the principle of no double benefit, no further concessionary fares could be provided. In fact, there are only some 3,000 children of this category. The amount involved is also very small. However, the administration has remained stubborn. I don't know why the SAR government cannot allow itself more flexibility so that these children can also enjoy the $2 concession. And because of this minor flaw, it has stirred dissatisfaction among the community. The other problem is that the way of thinking is outdated. After the policy has been implemented, it is just left there. As said by Mr. Wong Kwok-in last year, the disability allowance system in Hong Kong was set up in 1971. It has been some 3 decades since its implementation. Despite minor amendments to the scheme, there hasn't been any major change. Now, there are voices in the community alleging that the medical assessment form cannot really reflect the physical condition or the disabilities of PWDs. The administration has been urged time and again for improvements, but so far I have not seen any improvements or any undertaking to improve the situation. I have the feeling that the administration is dodging the problem, and therefore we are going to support Mr. Wong Kwok-in's amendment. My third observation is that the administration simply turns a blind eye to the problems. For example, on the issue of employment of PWDs, according to the study conducted by the Equal Opportunities Commission, the unemployment rate for PWDs have reached 87%. That is to say, for every 100 PWDs, only 13 of them are in employment. Some of them might have attained university education, but because of discrimination, they are unable to secure a full-time job. They can only work part-time. And they are facing more difficulties after the implementation of the statutory minimum wage. The administration is well aware of the problem. Apart from encouraging public organizations and NGOs to employ more PWDs, there has not been any policy to encourage the private sector to employ more PWDs. And we urge the administration to safeguard the equal job opportunities for PWDs. We recommend the introduction of an employment quota system so as to encourage enterprises to employ more persons with disabilities, and tax concessions should also be provided for these enterprises. However, these suggestions have never been paid heed to. The administration never listened to our suggestions. We're not disabled. We cannot truly feel how they feel when they're being discriminated against, when they're put in a disadvantaged position. So we should not see the world only from the perspective of an able-bodied. I have watched a Japanese drama called Beautiful Life, which is about the love affair between a hairdresser and a girl in a wheelchair. In one of the scenes, the hairdresser squatted to watch the sunset because he wanted to feel what it was like to be sitting in a wheelchair. Miracles don't happen to every person with disabilities, but I firmly believe that with faith and care, the administration can adopt a people-oriented policy so that the PWDs can be treated equally. So, and in conclusion, the DAB supports the original motion as well as all the amendments. We hope that with joint effort, the administration can be urged to pay attention to the well-being of PWDs so that we have an inclusive society.
Dr. K.K. Kwok. Mr. Deputy, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Leung Yiu-chung for making an undaunted effort in speaking out for the PWDs in this council. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung has always asked that there should be a fair concession scheme for PWDs. Now we have seen it implemented in part, but I believe he had never thought that when we have fair concession scheme for PWDs, this does not apply to PWDs under the age of 12. In August 2008, the Convention on the Rights of PWDs was extended to Hong Kong, but unfortunately, you can see that the convention has not been paid much attention. I have amended the original motion in 4 aspects. First of all, public education. 2, barrier-free environment. 3, helping the PWDs integrate into society. And D, special education. In the convention, Article 8, it says that we should raise awareness throughout society to foster respect for the rights and dignity of PWDs and also to combat stereotypes, prejudices, and harmful practices. I have heard this report. As you know, we have guide dogs in Hong Kong now. But this is just starting to happen. And so the Society for the Blind and also the Ebenezer School have cooperated in launching a scheme with 4 dogs. But in the first stage, we have got only 2 such guide dogs. And just 2 days ago, I myself saw one of the dogs on a radio program. Unfortunately, Ms. Fu and Mr. Zhang, the 2 dog owners, when they applied the service of these 2 guide dogs, they were given unhappy experiences because they went on the MTR and buses with the guide dogs. They were discriminated against by passengers around them. They were trying to go into restaurants and shopping malls, but then they were told to go away by security guards. This is so unfortunate. Hong Kong is a society with a relatively high standard of education for the people, and Hong Kong has progressed to such a stage. But then, even today, we still do not practice anti-discrimination enough. I can say that in terms of public education, the administration has not done a good job. We wouldn't like to see such events repeated. And that is why I think the administration has to enhance public education and to help PWDs integrate into society. Secondly, a barrier-free environment. Article 9 of the Convention states that we have to look at buildings, roads, and other indoor and outdoor facilities, including schools, housing, medical facilities, and workplaces, to provide barrier-free access. I wouldn't want to go into too much detail, but if you look at roads, crossings, schools, and shopping malls, we still do not provide barrier-free access. However, you cannot imagine that there is not even barrier-free access in hospitals. In one of the questions asked in this council, we asked the hospital authority how the convention was implemented in medical organizations, and that is how barrier-free access is provided. And yet, the earliest, we have to wait till 2016. In other words, after the convention has been extended to Hong Kong for 8 years before, we can expect to see some of these facilities in our hospitals. Hospitals are where PWDs always have to frequent. They need treatment there. They would always have to visit these hospitals. And yet, even at hospitals, the administration has not dictated that hospitals comply with the convention. This is unimaginable. And that is why you need this amendment. If this is happening in hospitals, not to mention schools, government offices, and shopping malls, the situation is really difficult to accept. We cannot accept it because without such, you cannot help them integrate into society. The third amendment has to do with Article 19 of the Convention, and that is to make sure that public facilities and various types of community services are responsive to the needs of PWDs. And as said in the original motion, PWDs under 12 also need to integrate into society. They are our future hope. We hope that PWDs under the age of 12 can grow up in a barrier-free society so that they can participate in social activities so that they are integrated. Why has the administration allowed such children to be excluded from the fair concession scheme? And parents do have a difficult time taking their children out. We are talking about an inclusive society. We're talking about community care, but can you see any inclusion or care here? The Fourth Amendment has to do with Article 24 of the Convention. That in the country or region, we have to pay attention to special education needs. In many countries, there is a special education law. Why is that so? As you know, not to mention to have a law for it. In fact, many parents have to wait till very late to find that their children have special education needs like mild autism and other special education needs, for example, lack of concentration, plus ADHD. According to the psychiatrists, about 11% of school children are in this category. And in the US, a survey has been done. It was found that after assessment, over 80% of prisoners have special education needs or disorders. When children are in this category and yet they do not have the support they need, including screening, including assessment by psychologists and other appropriate arrangements, plus support from schools, very often they would become habitual losers. I don't know how many of school dropouts or students in Band 3 schools are in this category, but a lot of frontline social workers have told me that, in fact, these children would have loved to study. Yet in school, in the community, in society, they do not receive the support they need, and in the end, they are totally neglected. We must go in the direction of legislation. This is not new. Just look at Taiwan. There is already a special education law there. And special education needs are separated into 12 categories in Taiwan, including audio, oral, behavior, multi disorders, poor development, and autism, etc., etc. They give such special needs very fine descriptions so that the children would get the exact help they need. And these children would need small class teaching. Mr. Ip Kin-yun is not here. When we talked about small class teaching, precisely these are the children with special education needs who would need small class teaching so that they receive the attention they require. And yet under the present education policy, nobody pays any attention, nobody gives any help. Mr. President, we don't want these children to lack support and care. I hope members will support my amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Emily Lau. Mr. President, I speak to support Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion, and that is building an inclusive society for all. And as mentioned by other members, we have great respect for Mr. Leung because throughout the years he has proposed a number of motions in relation to the welfare of persons with disabilities. I have also moved an amendment. I urge the administration to implement the recommendations relating to Hong Kong made by the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities after it had examined the report submitted by China, including Hong Kong and Macau, on her implementation of the convention during the session convened at Geneva in September this year. Mr. President, perhaps you have heard this on other occasions. The Democratic Party formed an alliance with PWD groups, and we had some 20 or 30 people delegation. Some of them were wheelchair bound. They went with great determination to Geneva, and the UN committee attached great importance to their views. And we joined hands in expressing the wishes of PWDs and the community's concern for the welfare of PWDs to Geneva. And after a 2-day meeting, the UN committee prepared a report containing the concluding observations. Well, the secretary did not attend. In fact, the Permanent Secretary did not attend either. Well, the commissioner attended, and the commissioner actually received a reminder from the UN committee. Now, one important point in the concluding observations is the definition of disability, and the definition adopted by the SAR government at present is very much outdated, and it is not a standardized definition. The administration is urged to adopt a unified definition of disability. And as far as the Convention on the Rights of PWDs is concerned, well, it has been enforced in Hong Kong since 2008. And actually, in an oral question, this question was asked. Actually, the Commissioner for Rehabilitation is at the rank of D2. Well, D2 is already of a higher rank than legislators. But according to the administration, the rank is not high enough, and the recommendation is that the authority should be increased. Well, I don't know how this can be done by the administration. Perhaps we should ask Ms. Sophia Cole. And on the 30th of last month, I asked a written question, and the secretary said that he would consider reviewing the role and the functions of the commissioner. However, according to the existing policy, for interdepartmental issues, the policy committees chaired by the CS4A or the FS will take care of these issues. However, a lot of the recommendations put forward by the UN committee actually involves different bureaus and departments. So our alliance said that the committee chaired by the CS4A and FS should start work immediately. The UN committee also pointed out that there is a lack of an independent organization to monitor the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of PWD. So an independent body should be set up, but we should not ask Ms. Sophia Cole to select the members of the committee. Otherwise, this will never be independent. And also, there should be representation, and that is the PWD should also take part in the organization. Well, the administration says that we have the Equal Opportunities Commission, but it is very passive. And in terms of the composition and the selection of members or the appointment of members, well, there is This is problematic, and the public has lost confidence in the EOC. Mr. Lam Wun-kwong will leave very soon, and we're very concerned who will be appointed by Sophie Ko to the EOC. And for all these concerns, the administration is urged to review the discrimination legislations and policies. On the one hand, the EOC will be given greater powers. But on the other hand, we should find someone with authority to head the EOC so as to effectively monitor the implementation of the convention. Now, just now, another member already mentioned this, that is the Rehabilitation Advisory Committee, RAC. But, Mr. President, I don't know whether you have heard anything from this RAC over the past 2 years. I myself have heard nothing. Well, the LegCo also deliberated on this issue. We said we would go to the United Nations, etc. But we have heard nothing from RAC, and this, according to the administration, is the central organization for promoting the relevant policy. And as the title shows, it's about rehabilitation. But according to the UN committee, it's not about rehabilitation. It's about the rights of persons with disabilities. And rehabilitation is only one part of the rights of PWD. So, Secretary, you should change the title, or else RAC will never be able to monitor or play or fulfill its role effectively. And on how to urge the administration to implement the recommendations, well, there is also another issue of mainstreaming. Well, fortunately, Dr. Helena Wong is familiar with this subject. However, for the administration, throughout the Bureau, nobody is familiar with mainstreaming. And now, mainstreaming of gender points is also under the purview of Secretary. We have been doing something about this for many years, and about the bulletproof vest for women officers. Well, it has become such a mess. Well, this is something that we should do as urged by the UN committee. But Secretary is asked to do it, and I do not hold high hopes. So, according to the alliance, there should be a committee, a dedicated committee on the matters related to PWD, which should replace the Rehabilitation Advisory Committee. It should be representative enough to promote PWD-related policies so that we really have some mainstreaming. Mr. President, well, it's just like talking to Secretary is just like talking to CY Leung's team. It's futile. But still, I need to speak up or the public will criticize me. Now, about sign language. Well, the public is saying that there are those who cannot hear, but according to, or cannot get the sign language. But according to the information I received, cable news now also displays sign language. And actually, we provide sign language service in the LegCo meeting. But as mentioned just now, as mentioned during lunch with you, Mr. President, we offer 2 versions, but most TV stations opt for the one without sign language. So we should talk to the LegCo Commission. Sign language should be made available, and it should not be confined to questions only, but or to this motion only. Sign language should be provided for the whole of the council meeting. If we say that we are an international city, we cannot really catch up with the international standard. Well, I don't support DAB's amendments, but they say that they're going to support Mr. Leung, and I think the strong message should be disseminated.
Mr. Michael Tian, thank you. Mr. President, in principle, I support Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's original motion of establishing or building an inclusive society for all. But then I'm also very concerned about the impact of the implementation of the SMW on the employment of PWDs in terms of their income and also employment. Recently, I've got some information, and the Chinese Youth Social Worker Department study showed that after the implementation of the SMW, there have been some negative impacts on PWDs in terms of employment, because out of the 119 respondents, some 22%, that is about 20% of them, said that before the implementation of the SMW, they were able to find jobs, but then with the implementation of SMW, they've lost their jobs. And roughly speaking, if we are talking about some 46,000 people who found jobs early last year, they were people with disabilities, and according to the study, then it meant that with the implementation of the SMW, well, PWDs who have lost their jobs might have reached some 10,000 people. And according to some other studies, they showed that with regard to the wage rise for the PWDs after the implementation of the SMW, actually it only went up by about 10%. And with regard to organizations providing support to PWDs in employment, they've said that after the implementation of the SMW, their wages have not improved significantly. And for fast food shops that used to employ PWDs, even if they do not conduct the assessment, if they just pay them $28 an hour, they would also cut their work hours, and as a result, their income would also be significantly reduced. And also for the number of new employees with disabilities, the number has also dropped significantly. So I believe that with regard to the assessment mechanism, that might be the crux of the problem. According to the CNSD, in 2009, about 45,800 PWDs are involved in economic activities. That's 2009. And according to the Labor Department, as of end of March this year, only 195 PWDs received this productivity assessment. And during the past 2 months, only 11 underwent the assessment. And to a certain extent, that showed that for workers with disabilities, there is no incentive on their part to undergo this assessment. And there are organizations or groups that help people with hearing impairment to find jobs. They feel that this is quite an insult to them, and generally speaking, they would not be seeking to undergo this assessment on their own volition. And therefore, for people who have to take part in this assessment, I understand that there are also many difficulties, because for people with mobility problems, and also because of their lower Chinese and English language proficiency, it's not easy for them to complete the test. And I've also heard people say that, well, for those who used to hire PWDs, many of them are social enterprises, and in their budget, they've got limited budget. And as a result, they might not be able to afford to hire everybody on SMW, and they are not sure what the outcome might be after they have undergone this assessment. And they're also concerned that if the score is not very low, then they do not want to see a situation whereby after this assessment, they will be making this decision as to whether they would hire these PWDs. And as a result, before May last year, many social enterprises already started to reduce the number of employees with disabilities. I don't know whether this is true. That's why I asked for a review to find out the impact of the implementation of the SMW on the employment of PWDs, so that we'll be able to use that as a basis to see if the assessment mechanism is the best way to protect their rights and interests. Or should we review the mechanism comprehensively to see if we need to introduce something better. And for the information that I cited, well, some of them is what I heard, some of them I collected on my own, but then I am not very sure about whether this is true. That's why I'm asking for this review. So much for my remarks.
Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Mr. President, First of all, I thank Mr. Leung Yiu-chung for moving the motion on building an inclusive society for all. And 6 members, namely Mr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, Ms. Emily Lau, Mr. Chen Han-pang, Mr. Michael Tien, and Dr. Kwok Ka-ki for their amendments. Well, first of all, I need to make it clear that the SAR government attaches great importance to the welfare of persons with disabilities. They are not the forgotten ones, as alleged by Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Convention, took effect on the 31st of August 2008 in the People's Republic of China, including Hong Kong SAR. As set out in the Hong Kong Rehabilitation Program Plan, the objective of Hong Kong's rehabilitation policy has always been to help persons with disabilities develop their potential, as well as to build a barrier-free living environment with a view to enabling them to participate in full and equal opportunities, both in terms of their social life and personal growth. These are also the spirit and core values enshrined in the Convention. It is also the direction of continued development of rehabilitation services in Hong Kong. Since the application of the Convention to the Hong Kong SAR in August 2008, the government has been allocating substantial additional resources to strengthen the rehabilitation services for PWDs. The overall recurrent expenditure of these services has increased from $16.6 billion in 2007-08 to $21.7 billion in 2011-12, an increase of 31%. In 2012-13, the recurrent expenditure will further increase to $23.2 billion, representing an increase of close to 40% comparing to the expenditure in 2007-08. This shows the importance that we attach in improving our services for PWDs. Meanwhile, to promote public awareness of the spirit and core values enshrined in the Convention, the SAR government has, from 2009 onwards, substantially increased the annual allocation for public education activities from $2 million in the past to 13 million Hong Kong dollars to promote an equal, barrier-free, and inclusive society and the spirit and core values enshrined in the Convention. In light of this policy objective, the government bureaus and departments are well aware of the need to fully consider the stipulations of the Convention in formulating policies and implementing initiatives. PWDs and stakeholders must be appropriately consulted on policies and initiatives that have major impact on them. Guidelines should be formulated to ensure that the policies and initiatives can fully look after the needs of PWDs so that they can fully integrate into the community. In fact, through full collaboration between the government and the rehabilitation sector, including PWD groups, various sectors of the community, the rehabilitation services in Hong Kong have continued to develop over the years, which have laid a good foundation to further promote and enhance the protection of PWD's rights and equal opportunities. We will continue to strive to develop and refine our policies and services on this basis. The Labour and Welfare Bureau will also continue to liaise with the relevant policy bureaus and departments. Issue timely reminders for them to review the policies and initiatives under their purview and launch appropriate measures when necessary to ensure compliance with the Convention. Mr. President, the Hong Kong SAR submitted the first report under the Convention to the United Nations in August 2010. In drafting the report, we had taken on board views from various sectors of the community expressed during the public consultation on the drafting of the report in February and March 2010. The report we submitted sets out in detail the administrative, legal and other measures introduced by the Hong Kong SAR to implement the convention and their progress. It also sets out the effort made by the rehabilitation sector, including PWD groups and various sectors of the community, in building an equal and barrier-free society. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of PWDs scrutinized the report in September this year and put forward recommendations for us to further implement the convention. The Bureau is now reviewing the recommendations with the relevant policy bureaus and departments and considering the appropriate follow-up actions. We will also report to the Electoral Panel on Constitutional Affairs and Rehabilitation Advisory Committee in December on this subject and the administration's initial response to the committee's recommendations. Also, on the UN's request, we will submit the second report to CPRD in September 2014 to report on the implementation of the convention and the improvement measures taken based on the conclusion of the first report. Mr. President, I so submit. I will give a more detailed response after hearing from members. Thank you.
I
have just got a notice from the Secretariat that Now TV, cable TV, and also the Internet have agreed to broadcast our sign language interpretation. Now, I'm of the view that we can conclude the meeting tonight, so we will continue until we finish everything on the order paper. I support the original motion and the amendments. I like to say that I particularly will speak on Dr. K.K. Kwok's special education needs for children. I like to say that this does not only apply to children, actually. Hong Kong is an international city. We have IT, so we should make use of our advantage in order to improve the quality of living and education of the people with special needs. And that is why we must implement the obligations under the Convention on the Rights of PWDs in areas outside the traditional areas like transportation, etc. We should also try to see how these people use IT. For example, some organizations have tried to apply for funding from the CCF in order to provide subsidy for monthly fees for smartphones so that 3G, 4G networks can provide face-to-face instant communication, including simultaneous interpretation for PWDs. However, this was not allowed, but then we have tried out in the process the use of such technology by PWDs. The administration has been promoting filling the digital divide, and you have created a web page, and you have also provided help for such science and research. According to the survey report from the Society for the Blind, local websites have improved their barrier-free access. However, there is still a big gap from international standards. It can be seen, therefore, that the administration should plow in more resources. However, according to the digital integration report submitted by the Government Information Service Coordinator, released in May, we only have had $2 million to provide barrier-free web access. Now, what can be done? Does it mean that you can address all the needs of PWDs by having $2 million? That is only enough for promotional activities. Just look at the blind. There are 120,000 of them. And also, there are people suffering from limb disabilities, and there are 50,000 of them. So why don't you make a guideline for barrier-free websites? And also you can provide tax concessions for writing web pages which allow the disabled to access them so that the PWDs can get the information from the web more easily. And also the assisted scientific research, well, the Government Information officers have only given $360,000 for research for 9 such initiatives. One magazine that was also published today said that it seems there is a problem with their fiscal discipline. The relevant organization has not been given the subvention promised. Well, this might have to do with monitoring by the government, but then I think there is a more serious integrity problem. It is said that the products should be free for downloading and for distribution. In the 9 items, some have to do with hardware, some with software. The software, of course, will only circulate on the web. However, $40,000 will not give you a lot of hardware so that it can be distributed to people in need. In fact, that development program just doesn't plow resources into making the information available to those who need it. And also, the barrier-free electronic learning program of the Society for the Blind has applied for the funding from the Quality Education Fund, and the amount was $3.8 million. And that is, they make use of software and hardware in order to help children with special education needs to read and write. Earlier on in a news report, you must have seen this blind secondary school student. Without such special electronic books, he would have to pull a big suitcase to school every day. Shouldn't we sympathize with them? Shouldn't you give parity treatment to them as other disadvantaged groups in society? We can see such subvention is distributed in many different government departments, the Education Bureau, the Government Chief Information Coordinator's Office. I believe you should really focus your assistance so these people can be more efficiently helped. Apart from people with physical disabilities, you have to understand you need to help people with dyslexia. Only 1% of newly published books cater to the people with special needs, including those with dyslexia. The administration should encourage publishers to work together with NGOs helping PWDs so that versions suitable for PWDs can be published. You should also consult for the amendment of legislation so that you can exempt the copyright matters for such publications. Thank you. Mr. Dennis Kwok. Thank you, President. President, the objective of the Convention on the Rights of PWDs is such that they enjoy equal rights, they enjoy freedom and equal treatment. And education is a very important channel to help them build their lives so that they can expound their potential and expand their horizon, and also to increase and enhance the communication and interpersonal skills so that they can continue to widen their horizon in society. I like to concentrate on education because Article 24 of the Convention states that it is important to protect the rights of PWDs for education, and through education they can integrate into society. Unfortunately, the Secretary for Education is not here today. I hope the administration will relate our views on education to the Secretary for Education. Just now, the Secretary for Labour and Welfare said that for people who are mentally disabled, they have not been forgotten by society. I remember in 2003, mentally handicapped children enjoyed 12 years free education, but mainstream students only had 9 years of free education. Why they have 3 years more? This is because they have special education needs. They need more time to and more resources and more help in order to learn the same curriculum, and that is why they have 3 years more. Unfortunately, when we cater to the needs of the majority, when you launch the new secondary school curriculum 334, when you increase the 9 years free education to 12 years free education, you have forgotten this group of students with mental incapacities. You have not extended their education period likewise by 3 more years. In other words, you forgot about them. Their special education needs had not been faced up to by the administration. At that time, I had the opportunity to represent these mentally handicapped students. I represented them in a JR case in order to fight for education rights. I promised them if I should join the council, I would continue to fight for their rights. You forced the mentally disadvantaged students to seek a judicial review. Nobody wanted to see that happen, but this is because the administration's policy did not pay enough attention to the special education needs of this group of students, and that is why we had that JR case. I hope that in your future education policies, the administration will pay special attention to the needs of mentally handicapped students, the resources and the time they need. Dr. K.K. Kwok mentioned just now, in Taiwan, there is already a special education law. It is not just Taiwan which enacted the law in 1984. In the U.S., it did so in 1975. UK 2010, Japan 1954, and also France 2006. So you can see what other countries have done for students with special education needs. Now, what are the articles in those laws? Like in preschool, in primary, secondary, and tertiary education stages, the law must provide special kinds of education to tie in with the special needs of these students, psychologically and physically at different stages of their growing up. And also, local governments must have a particular budget for special education, and it must not be lower than a certain percentage of the government's expenditure. Article 24 of the Convention says that there should be such help on different levels, and also that you should help them to have education throughout their lives so that all PWDs can enjoy life in a free society. In Hong Kong, we have the so-called integrative education for PWDs, but ever since it was implemented, we could see PWDs joining mainstream schools. But then there are so many gaps in the policy. There are so many problems faced by PWDs. By that I mean, in mainstream schools, there are not just not the resources, the manpower resources who have the experience to take care of these children, and whether they can really be integrated into a mainstream school. Nobody is helping them to see whether they can cope with the timetable and also how they are learning in a mainstream school. These are the problems we can see with integrated education. Many schools can see that they are left to fend for themselves because schools just do not know what to do about their problems. So you are wasting the school life and even the life of these PWDs. In fact, you can give more time, more resources for mentally handicapped students so they can really be integrated, so that they can really cope with the learning mode in a mainstream school. President, the CP supports the original motion by Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. We hope that the Hong Kong administration will make laws as soon as possible so we have a comprehensive special education law and policy to help PWDs to integrate into mainstream education.
Mr. Yu Si-wing. President, the CRPD came into effect on the 31st of January 2008, and China was one of the states that have acceded to this convention. With regard to this convention, the SAR Government has an unshakable responsibility to implement the Convention, and it must take measures to implement the Convention in order to protect the rights of PWDs. And the first report was submitted in October 2010, and it mentions that with regard to the protection of PWDs' rights, their rights would be one of the most important considerations in considering their rights. And in December 2011, the CCF also introduced a training grant for training children with disabilities, and some groups have also introduced programs for children with special needs. And for infants up to the age of 2, pre-education service was provided, and that was a response to the requirement under the Convention. But then, in terms of the implementation of the public transport concession fare scheme, it only serves those over the age of 65, and also those between 12 and 64 with 100% in capacity, and therefore it is a scheme that has not been well thought through, including the fact that those under 12 and also people with some physical disabilities, they would not be covered. The administration must consider this again in order to ensure that these people will benefit, and therefore I'll support the original motion. The Convention also says that for PWDs, they should be given more support in the community so that they can be encouraged to integrate into society, and for community facilities, they should also meet the needs of PWDs. And Hong Kong is one of the tourist destinations in Asia. Other than meeting the above-mentioned requirements, the administration should also educate the public so that for visitors going to public places and also tourist attractions, they should try to accommodate these PWDs. But then what we can see now is that in many shopping centers and also tourist attractions, when it's very crowded, when there are many people, there might be visitors and tourists, and they're actually using toilets for the disabled. For example, lifts for the disabled, they would be taking up those spaces, and as a result, PWDs will have to wait for a long while, or they might not be able to use those facilities. And there are groups or organizations that have done something that we should take reference to. We should take reference from. For example, in Disneyland, they have a special counter and service counter for PWDs, and the staff would also take the initiative to help them move around in the park. And even without assistance, these PWDs will be able to enjoy their time in Disneyland. And also, there are many shopping centers in Hong Kong. We should encourage or even legislate to require these operators to provide barrier-free access for the disabled, and staff should also be given proper training to help the disabled. Well, Hong Kong's MTR and buses have already offered this priority seats for the disabled, and also these people should also be given proper care. We think that the administration should extend the scope of the scheme so that other transport operators should also be encouraged to do the same. They should also be allowed to use those services without having to queue up. And also, there should also be leaflets distributed by the various operators in order to promote this awareness amongst the public. And with public education and publicity, both the public and the visitors would also take part in caring for the disabled so that there can be more harmony in our society, and we should also help one another. Well, a civilized Hong Kong would also be conducive to the development of the tourism sector. These are my remarks. Ms. Dr. Anne Chiang. President, the CRPD has been enforced in Hong Kong for some time. Under the Convention, I'm most concerned about Article 27.5. What does it say? Promote employment opportunities and career advancement for persons with disabilities in a labor market, as well as assistance in finding, obtaining, maintaining, and returning to employment. Okay, let's take a look. at how we compare with other countries in terms of employment opportunities for the disabled. Let's look at some statistics. According to the CNSD, we have 360,000 PWDs, accounting for some 5.2% of the total population, and some surveys have found that if you look at the overall unemployment rate, it's 3.2% in Hong Kong, but then for PWDs, if you look at their unemployment rate, it's 87%. In other words, for every 100 PWDs, only 13 are employed. In terms of employment rate, we have about 360,000 workers, and the ratio between male and female is 70 to 30%, but then for PWDs, only less than 20% of them are employed. But then if you look at some Western economies, for example, in Canada, Ireland, in Canada, for the PWDs, the employment rate is 53.5%, and in Ireland is 37%. How come they can do so well? Well, let's take one step further. That is under Article 27.7. Employment of PWDs in public departments, for example, in Europe and Africa, Japan, and South Korea, they have this quota system. What does that mean? Under the quota system, it means that for the public sector, after hiring a certain number of people, they will have to hire at least one PWD. And on the mainland, they have already legislated on this. The requirement is that for all government units or departments, they will have to have this quota, and that should not be lower than 1.8% of the total establishment. And in South Korea, it's already legislated that for all the public sector bodies, for organizations hiring more than 34 people, in hiring PWDs, the number should not be less than 3% of the total staff force. But then, what are we doing? According to the CSB, the Civil Service Bureau, Hong Kong is not faring that badly. Well, if you look at the number of disabled civil servants, actually, they are accounting for some 2% of the total civil service, and for the welfare agencies like Pok Oi Hospital, Caritas, and also Yan Noi Tong, and so on, they've also agreed and promised that they will be increasing the ratio of PWDs, and that would be increased to some 2% of the total staff establishment. And therefore, for many public organizations, they have been doing this, but then it's only that they are not doing this as forcefully as their counterparts overseas. Yes, the PWDs might be disabled, but then they are as capable as the able-bodied. Well, some told me that for people with physical disabilities, it's easy to adapt to that, but then the most difficult part is for the community to give them chances, so that they can further develop their potential, so that they can continue to contribute to our society. Well, about 10 odd years ago, in my company, I once hired a PWD. Yes, he was suffering from cerebral palsy, but then he was able to continue to run, and as a result, he was able to represent Hong Kong in international contests, and he was able to win a medal in the Paralympics in the 4 times 100 meter relay. It shows that they are fully capable in serving the community in different positions in the community. I can also share this experience with you. On one occasion, I was visiting a social enterprise, as a restaurant for the run by the disabled, and I talked to one of the staff members, and she told me that she had a very happy experience, and I asked him, well, how come she was so happy? And she showed me something from her hair. She showed me a hairpin, and she said that, well, I bought it myself, and I was able to make money, and I was able to buy this on my own, and I was very touched, because finally she felt that she's somebody who's useful, and she can really feel that there is meaning to her life, and she's able to have dignity and pride, and therefore employment is a basic right. And therefore, I believe that for PWD, if they're able to get a proper job, then they'll be able to live more happily, and they'll feel more meaning to their lives. President, I support the motion today With regard to promoting the employment of the PWD, I have the following suggestions. I hope that the administration will follow up and implement these measures. First of all, as the largest employer in Hong Kong, the administration should set a good example by increasing the employment of PWDs so that there can be more PWDs being hired as civil servants, and there should also be incentive policies for private organizations, for example, tax incentives, so as to encourage private enterprises, and they should be encouraged to hire PWDs. For example, they can also hire these people on a part-time basis. They can also work in home offices, so that more people will be able to reintegrate into society by rejoining the labor force. We should also legislate, and we should also set up a quota system for PWDs and employment, so that for sizable organizations, they should introduce this quota for PWDs. And finally, I hope that the C&S department can regularly conduct surveys and announce the figures with regard to employment of PWDs, so that that could also be an indicator as to the success or otherwise of this policy, so that the administration will be able to introduce policies to help these people to find jobs, and then they will be able to integrate into society and develop their potential. These are my remarks. Thank you.
Dr. Kenneth Chan. President. Talking about daily contact with PWDs and also the main issue of this debate today, and that is to build an inclusive society for all. I believe I would have less experience than other members in the council. In my office now, we have one PWD. From our daily contact, I can concretely tell you that maybe PWDs suffer from some physical functioning problems. Apart from that, we don't have to treat them differently. We can communicate and liaise with them normally, so they feel that they are just like any other person, and that is to show them respect and confirm their ability. I think that is the best support we can give them. Unfortunately, Hong Kong society today shows some care and concern for them, but then there is a lack of respect. Let us look at public policies. Members of the public do agree that society should take care of PWDs, but then we are not giving enough consideration to reasonable respect and also equal opportunities for PWDs. I'd like to talk about this from two angles, education and employment. In terms of education, the administration has always emphasized integrated or inclusive education, and they are asking PWDs to adjust to integrated education. On the face of it, you allow PWDs to be integrated into mainstream schools. However, if you do not have the support facilities, integrated education will mean that PWD students and parents would have a very difficult time coping. In the school, there must be dedicated teachers to provide support for PWDs, and in fact, we don't see such professional support. We believe teachers have to undergo special training, but then they also find this very hard. Now they are only subject to 90 hours of training, while other teachers will only have 30 hours of training, and teaching assistants only 12 hours of training. And yet you demand that teachers and teaching assistants can come to grips with skills and techniques to take care of PWDs with different needs. Now that is totally inadequate, and you do not have the time for parents and teachers and also students to adapt to a mainstream school environment, and therefore you must provide more resources. When PWD students are in mainstream schools without the right kind of support, they find it very difficult to adapt to school life, and that flies in the face of your original objective of helping them to be integrated in school, and this must be rectified. At the same time, you must give more choices of special education to PWDs. You should not just provide integrated education and say that you can take the place of special education. Now we are reviewing the new NSS and the Society for the Blind, and also Hong Kong U jointly conducted a study to show that the visually impaired, when they face the NSS, they do not have the right kind of support facilities. They are being unfairly treated, and they have to go through a lot of challenges, and they are subject to school-based assessment, and yet they are not respected. Coming to employment, as other members have said, that the employment rate of the PWDs is very low. In report number 48 of the CNSD, the workforce of PWDs is 45,800, and the unemployment rate is 10%, which is way above the average 3.4% of Hong Kong as a whole. Many PWDs feel that they are subject to prejudices and suspicions in society, and so they somehow avoid society, and they do not remain in the workforce, and they only rely on care given by their families. But then employment is important for them to be integrated in society, because if they have their values confirmed, then they enjoy an equal opportunity at work, and employers should be assisted to understand their abilities. I understand employers have their doubts. However, these doubts need not be there, because my personal experience can let you understand that PWDs can actually work as well if we just adjust the workflow a little, and they can cooperate very well with other colleagues. And number 3, the administration must do something to encourage PWDs to work. First, you should be the first to provide opportunities of work, so that you set a good example for private organizations, so that they have more confidence in employing the PWDs. And secondly, the administration must look at employment and support facilities and provide relevant data from time to time about employment of PWDs, so that there will be an objective discussion in society. And number 3, in the long term, you must have an employment quota system for PWDs, so that there is protection of employment, and so that there will be an incentive for private organizations to be proactive in employing PWDs. In the short term, government departments and public bodies and organizations must adopt a proactive approach to employ PWDs and set an indicator, maybe at 3% or even higher. President, PWDs do not need our sympathy. They do not need our donations, but they need equal opportunities. They need our respect, and they need some room for expounding their potential and talent. This is what the CRPD has as its core values and philosophy. Thank you. Mr. Ronnie Tong. President, sometimes I really admire our colleagues, or I should say some colleagues. President, with regard to problems faced by PWDs and the relevant issues, I think we have had at least 10 debates in the 8 years when I have been a councillor, but there has been no progress whatsoever. 5 members are moving amendments to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's original motion. And when I read amendments to amendments, all these different compositions, there are 64 such amendments. Now, it's really like a Christmas tree. And in one amendment, there are 15 paragraphs. I really admire my colleagues. After such a long time, after making so many attempts without progress, and yet members are still so forthcoming in making amendments to the motion, I think we need to be sympathetic to the work of our Secretariat, and therefore we have not written 30, 40 paragraphs in our amendments. But to me, President, we just need 2 words to fully put our finger on this problem. We don't need 15 paragraphs. We just need 2 words. Which are these 2 words, President? I have thought about it. Should it be callous in English? That may be too harsh. So I would say unsympathetic. Is it that we can't, or we don't have the ability to? Or is it that we're just unwilling? So we are unsympathetic. Is it that without the CLPD, the convention, we don't need to do anything? Or is it that even if we have it, we are unwilling to do something, so that we are unsympathetic? Is it that we have too much resource? Are there more PWDs in Hong Kong than the poor in Hong Kong when I mention resources? Would it make our SARG bankrupt because of the recurrent expenditure required? No, that wouldn't be the case. So we are being apathetic or unsympathetic. And for example, barrier-free access. The administration has advanced many excuses not to provide the access. We have had subcommittees, and the administration came, and then CY Leung came, and he would be trying to find very inexpensive projects so as to divert the public's attention, so that the public would just look at livelihood issues chosen by him, and he has gone for the universal accessibility program, saying that there could be the retrofitting of lifts on walkways. In the last 8 years, it was said that there were a lot of technical and resource problems, but then all of a sudden, those were resolved. So it is our indifference. And about employment for PWDs, as mentioned by other colleagues, let us look at the lowest paid workers. They may well be the PWDs. What do they usually do, regardless of their academic qualification? They can never get high-ranking jobs. They would just be sealing envelopes. So they help send pamphlets to the public, and they wash dishes, earning $4,000 a month. The SARG is the biggest employer in Hong Kong. And if members can engage PWDs in our offices, why can't the administration do something? Why doesn't the administration take the lead to change our society's culture? So it is indifference. And what about the transport needs of the PWDs? Let us not talk about concessions, but assistance. We have talked about that for 8 years, and now you allow them to pay $2 for a trip. But then the secretary still said to me that, sorry, we are not helping the children. This is so mind-boggling. I have really failed to understand this. Maybe I'm too stupid and I'm not suited to living in this society. I really can't understand why children under the age of 12 are not helped. Is it that they are better at earning for the living than those above the age of 12 and their parents? Of course not. Who would be paying for their transport fares but their parents? Many colleagues have said that in other countries, they don't only help the PWDs, they also help the carers who take them out. So they are assisted in integrating into society. And yet, we are not benefiting the children under 12 in this fair concession scheme. And when you ask the administration why, the administration would say, I don't have a reason, so what? Now that is indifference. President, many colleagues have been impassioned in making their speeches. They have been most moving in making their speeches, and many of them are hugely persuasive. But whether this motion is carried or not, this administration will still do nothing because it is indifferent.
Mr. Lee Chuk-yan. Thank you, President. Just now, Mr. Ronnie Tong said that the community as a whole is apathetic. He didn't want to use the word callousness. But then for so many years, we are still on ground zero, and we have made no progress whatsoever on this front. Then the only word that I can think of is callousness. The administration is really callous. We cannot see that the administration is willing to make positive response to the requests or demands by PWDs. Just look at one incident. That's about the half-fare concession for PWDs. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung has been asking for it for 8 years. And of course, the Bureau Director will say that, well, we have done it already. We have introduced a $2 fare scheme. But then if you take a further look into it, if the administration has been positive, if it's not callous, then why do we have to propose it for 8 years? And now it has finally agreed to do it. And still, it has only done it half-heartedly. As Mr. Ronnie Tong pointed out, for those under 12, during the last term, the administration promised that it would be looking into it. For PWDs under the age of 12, if they're students, why are they not entitled to the $2 fare scheme? Why not? So they have promised to do it, and I hope that the Bureau Director will say that at least he'll be able to give us a better answer. So at least some changes will be made. And also for the 50% or the half fare proposal, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng really is fond of placing this broken leg before us. And he was wondering how come for the 50% disabled, they are not entitled to it. Well, that's true. If you've lost one limb, then how come you're not eligible for this? Well, for people with the registration card for PWDs, why are they not eligible for this? Because you're just looking at those eligible for disability allowance, and only those who are 100% disabled will be entitled to it. How come you're not prepared to widen the scope so that we can have total inclusion? So that for PWDs, whatever the extent of the disability or the degree of disability, they should be entitled to it. This is on the issue of transport fare. But then what I'd like to talk most today, and I think the administration and the community as a whole have not been able to do it as far as inclusion is concerned, is about employment. This is what makes a PWD unable to integrate into the community, and he's not able to live with dignity. That's because they are unemployed for a long while. And if you just look at the figure, well, in Hong Kong, if you look at our labor force, the ratio between male and female, all right, we're talking about a ratio of 7:3. So 70% of the male are working, and for women, it's about 50%. Okay, how about the PWDs? 13%. Only 13% of them are working. In other words, amongst the PWDs, those who are economically active, only about 10+% of them are economically active. What about the remaining people? Well, they are homebound. So they have no choice but to become homebound. They have no jobs, they can only stay home. So we have talked about this for many years, and still no initiative has been put in place to help them. Well, the Labour Party has been advocating this. We suggest that there should be an employment quota system. And as Dr. Fernando Jiang did not have enough time to expound on this, let me say a bit more about this. Well, in fact, in many places, they have introduced this system in order to ensure that PWDs will be able to find jobs. This is the most proactive way of doing it. All right, you might say that putting it or imposing this on the SMEs will not work. Well, we are just talking about institutions hiring more than 100 people. And if you're not able to force them to do it, then there is another way to do it. Well, they would not be forced to do it. But then if they fail to do it, then the same amount of money can be used to procure services, and in procuring services, they will have to procure such services from social enterprises for the disabled. So we do have many social enterprises, whether it's car washing or catering establishments or even courier services and so on. Many of these workshops are run by the disabled. They are competent. They are able to work. And if you're willing to procure services from them, or if you're able or willing to hire PWDs, then that would immediately create many jobs. Please do not just say that for the job placement center, they've been doing a lot for the PWDs. Well, even with the unit here, if the employers are not willing to hire them, then even if you set up subsidized bodies and also social enterprises for a long while, they have not been able to do it. And the administration said that the target would be 2%. But then if they still are not able to do it or are reluctant to do it, we have written to you many times, and every time you would write to the welfare agencies, and Dr. Yok Chow said that he would be writing to those organizations, but then no progress has been made whatsoever. So if this is not carelessness, what is it? So if you are able to introduce this quota system for the PWD, only then will we be able to resolve the problem. Yes, some people say that we should introduce a tax incentive system. Yes, of course, it's better than nothing. But then the real solution to the problem is a quota system. I hope that you can move in this direction. Some positive steps will have to be taken instead of just maintaining instead of just staying put. And for SMWs, actually, the PWDs are not covered because you require them to undergo this assessment, and only about 200 plus have undergone assessment. All right, there are so many PWDs are working. How come only 200 plus have undergone the assessment? And also, what about the rehabilitation institutions or organizations? Well, for staff working there, they have not been asked to undergo the assessment. Why don't you just ask all the organizations that are supported or subvented by the administration? They will have to undergo this assessment, and if they need additional funding, then you will have to give them, because this is something that has to be done. Why don't you give them more money so that they can do it, so that all the PWDs working with rehabilitation agencies, they should undergo the assessment? At present, it's not the case. Ms. Sito, well, on the 31st of August 2008, the CRPD already came into force in Hong Kong. But then it's already 2012. It's over 4 years since the first introduction, and yet the administration has done very little. It's like squeezing toothpaste, and also we have to rely on the PWDs, and they will have to come forward to fight for such rights, and only then have we been able to get some very small concession. For example, for those over 18, they are able to continue to study at school. Those are the disabled. Those are the mentally disabled, and also for those with hearing impairment. Where would they get the devices from? Whether it's from the hospital authority or from the administration, and also for the Ibinus school for the blind. Well, every time they will have to come forward after they've been affected, and only after a long fight would the administration be prepared to make some concessions. So from these, you can see that well, even if the SAR government has introduced the CRPD in Hong Kong after it has come into force in Hong Kong, if you look at the mindset of the administration, there has been no change whatsoever. From a very young age to over 18, they'll be able to continue schooling. And also for students with disabilities, they are able to enroll into tertiary institutions, but then the universities are not able to offer any support. And for a blind student who has graduated, if he wants to become a teacher, that would be very difficult because schools do not welcome them. And also when they try to take rehab bus, the services are inadequate. And for shelter workshops, there are also a number of shortfalls, and they are not able to get continuous or lifelong learning. And also for the other support facilities, they are very harsh, and therefore for the PWDs, they are faced with tremendous difficulties from the time that they are born to the time when they die, and it involves different policy bureaus every time. When they try to get something, it's very, very difficult. And therefore, President, I agree with the original motion by Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, that is, we have to establish a dedicated committee which will see how the CRPD can be implemented in Hong Kong and at the central policy level. And also in terms of legislation, the committee will have to first talk to the executive so that every time when a new piece of legislation is introduced or when a new policy is introduced, there should be some scrutiny of these policies. So it's like the EIA mechanism, so that it would be centralized. So before you roll out the policy, you would have to assess it. And it's like the Women's Commission. We should look at it from different perspectives, and there should also be prevention before implementation. But then please do not establish this committee under your policy bureau, because for PWD's rights, it's not just about welfare. It's also not just about employment. It shows the entire community's respect for the individuals and also their born rights, and they are born equal. And also even for people with disabilities, it's only that because of the difference between human beings is because of the diversity of human beings. That's why they have this difference. And also, when you look at the convention, there is mention that there should be a central assessment mechanism. That's under Article 4, General Obligations. And 1.3 says that in different policies, you will have to consider how you can promote and promote the rights of the PWDs, and we need to have a dedicated committee before we can do it. And therefore, I hope that members will support it, so that the administration will implement this as soon as possible by setting up this dedicated committee. Just now, many members have spoken on employment, education, and welfare, and I'd like to talk about their cultural rights. Well, you might say that, well, for employment, education, and so on, if you put that aside and if you just focus on cultural rights, then you might be asking for too much. In fact, that's very much part of the International Convention on Economic and Cultural, Political and Cultural Rights, the ICCPR, and also, as far as the PWD are concerned, when they are able to take part in cultural activities, then they will have this very healthy cultural life and mental life, and that will also promote their well-being, and they will also be able to enjoy such activities together with their friends and families, and that would also mean that they can further integrate into the society. But then in taking part in cultural activities, very often we would just be looking at the sign language interpretation for them. And even for this council, we also have such service. But then even under the convention, apparently more importance would be attached to those with hearing impairment. But then for those with visual impairment, in taking part in cultural activities, they have not been given much assistance. In fact, they would have even greater difficulty because they can only hear and they are not able to see anything. They are not able to see colors. They are not able to see shapes. They can only listen. But then when a family is watching the TV or TV drama, if you only have some voiceover to tell you what's happening, when the family members are laughing very happily, or when people are very tense, they would not be able to take part. So they've been left in a completely dark world. And under the convention, in this respect, not much has been mentioned. But then for the Society for the Blind, a couple of years ago, it worked with Design Hong Kong, and they asked for a funding of $800,000 for training for some 70 trainees, and they would provide regular movie appreciation sessions for them. And I hope that with the establishment of this dedicated committee, we'll be able to look at the needs of PWDs. They have different disabilities, and they should be able to take part in cultural activities because their cultural life or their spiritual life can be enhanced, and this is what we'd like to see. Thank you.
Mr. Alan Leung. Mr. President, as an international city, Hong Kong has limited knowledge and support for persons with disabilities. Recently, according to a media report, a visually impaired lady walked along the streets of Hong Kong with a guide dog, and she suffered discrimination For example, when she took the MTR, she was criticized by passengers. And when she patronized a restaurant with the guide dog, she was stopped. And in the end, she had to call the police for assistance. The restaurant manager subsequently explained that due to the restaurant license, no pet could be allowed. He had no idea that guide dogs could be exempted. It shows that the administration had not been making sufficient effort in publicity. The Convention on the Rights of PWDs took effect in the People's Republic of China, including Hong Kong SAR, on the 31st of August 2008. The purpose of the Convention is to promote, protect, and ensure full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. In 2010, on the Convention's request, the Hong Kong SAR government submitted the first report on the implementation of the PWD-related policies. In the lengthy report, the SAR government set out the initiatives in promoting rights of PWD. In September this year, the UN Committee on the Rights of PWD held a meeting or conference in Geneva on the implementation of the Convention, and 32 recommendations were put forward in relation to the implementation of the Convention in Hong Kong and Macau, and on a number of occasions the words concerned or regrettable were used. For example, in relation to the promotion of Article 5, equality and non-discrimination, the committee was of the view that the Hong Kong SAR government was not proactive enough, and the EOC, which is supposed to be a monitoring organization, should take a more proactive role, in particular in handling complaints. Apart from the EOC being criticized, the UN committee, is also of the view that the Commissioner for Rehabilitation in Hong Kong is of a rank that is too low, and it lacks the function of monitoring the government. And in terms of inclusive education, it should be reviewed, and the teacher ratio should be improved, and the training of teacher in special education needs should be provided. Sufficient resources should be provided to ensure accessibility in tertiary education. As for other criticisms and recommendations, they include subsidy or allowance for PWDs in shelter workshops, which are close to exploitation, and also for protection for women with disabilities against abuse and exploitation, and the lack of unity in the various definitions of disability in the laws of Hong Kong, and the outdated criteria under the disability allowance. Now, the SAR government has brought shame to Hong Kong for not being able to observe the convention. The government actually was well aware of the criticisms. When the first report was drafted, when the consultation took place, the PWD concerned groups already raised these issues. The administration, however, turned a blind eye, and the support for the PWDs remained perfunctory. In addition, there is a lack of support for employment of PWDs. The UN Committee's report also recommended that the SAR government should play a more proactive role in promoting employment among PWDs, in particular to prioritize the employment of PWDs as civil servants. And according to Article 17 of the UN Convention, the government should facilitate employment of PWDs, and that's in Article 27. And the government should ensure that people with disabilities could work in the open market and be rewarded according to their capabilities. According to a survey conducted between 2009 and 2012, PWDs only accounted for 2% of the total establishment of the civil service. The Civic Party also thinks that the administration should review the implementation of the convention, be it loss of ability of limbs and visual impairment, ex-mental health patients with, or people with visceral diseases or learning difficulties. In fact, throughout the 4 years, people with all these kinds of disabilities only accounted for 2% of the civil service. Because of the lack of local legislation, the spirit and core values of the convention have not been able to be implemented in Hong Kong. We hope that the recommendations can be taken forward as soon as possible so that Hong Kong can truly become an inclusive international city. Mr. President, I so submit I support Mr. Leung's original motion and all the amendments. Mr. Albert Ho. Mr. President, I am grateful to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung for moving a motion on building an inclusive society for all, so that we can exchange views in this motion debate. As mentioned by many colleagues just now, the UN Committee on the Rights of PWDs in September this year, after scrutinizing the Hong Kong SAR Government's report, put forward as many as 30 observations and recommendations. The recommendations have to do with the social life of PWDs, education, employment, so on and so forth, and also healthcare and other areas like discrimination against PWDs and the lack of early identification and early interference when they receive education, so that for mentally handicapped women, they were being subject to domestic violence without adequate support, sexual violence without adequate support. And there is also insufficient opportunities for PWDs to take part in politics. And the Commissioner for Rehabilitation, as said by the UN Committee, is of rank which is too low to the extent that monitoring has not been effective. And the UN Committee on the Rights of PWDs has put forward so many recommendations. And we're glad on the one hand for their concern. On the other hand, we should feel ashamed because we are such an advanced city and yet there are a lot of shortcomings in this aspect. First, in relation to PWDs and disadvantaged groups, we have not given sufficient attention, and we should provide equal opportunities for them to show what a civilized society we have. If we cannot fulfill this responsibility, we are not a civilized society. We cannot call ourselves an advanced society. Now, the convention covers a wide topic. I can only focus on a few key points. We are very concerned about the low rate of employment for PWDs and a high unemployment rate among them, and also the low level of wages. We think that the administration should introduce more policies to boost their employment. I agree that the government and disadvantaged organizations should increase the ratio of disabled employees in their workplace. I agree that the current target should be increased so that more job opportunities can be created for them. At the same time, for social enterprises and contractors or tenderers for government contracts, if more job opportunities for PWDs can be provided, they should be given some preferential treatment, be it tax concessions or rental allowances. Or if it is a tendering exercise, more scores should be given or priority should be given to these tenderers in order to promote employment for PWDs. For the working environment, it is equally important that we raise the awareness of employers. I mean, we should educate them about the special needs of disabled employees. We must not discriminate against them. We must make appropriate adjustments to facilitate their work so that they can develop so that they can excel. And in the productivity assessment under the minimum wage ordinance, for the disabled employees who cannot get the minimum wage rate, subsidy should be provided by the administration so that they get the minimum wage or the SMW rate. The society should bear this responsibility so that they get reasonable pay. On barrier-free access, I think that the design manual, barrier-free access, at present has no retrospective effect, and it does not apply to a lot of government buildings or the buildings of the housing authority. For example, for hospitals, they should not be exempted from the application of the design manual. In August, Mr. C.Y. Leung said that inspections would be carried out on a lot of places. Barrier-free access will be provided, but I think that the design manual is very important. I hope Secretary could respond to this point in a moment. As for families with disabled members, I think that more care should be provided. For example, a supplement for carers of PWDs, and we are also concerned about the RCHDs and the problem of the long waiting list. As we understand that the average waiting time is over 31 months, and for those suffering from those who are moderately mentally handicapped, the waiting time is as long as 73 months. So I think that more places should be provided to take care of these PWDs.
Mr. Kin-chung, Mr. President, the most important meaning of the convention is to point out that PWDs do react with the environment that do not provide a barrier-free access to them. And the attitude is also important. If there will be a change in attitude, if there will be barrier-free access, then those who are regarded as PWDs today will be able to live just like anybody else tomorrow, and nobody would know that they are PWDs. And attitude and environment have to do with the change of culture. If we can change the environment so PWDs have the same right to participate in society, that is a human right. It is not welfare. And the department promoting the rights of the PWDs should not just be the Commissioner for Rehabilitation under the LWB. The committee investigated into the situation in Hong Kong, and it was worried, it said, that the Commissioner for Rehabilitation was responsible for promoting the rights of the Commissioner. Now, if the Commissioner is not ranked at an appropriate level, he will not be able to promote policies amongst different departments. Just look at education. Integrated education is fraught with flaws, and everybody, every stakeholder finds it a painful thing to be involved. I wonder if the Commissioner for Rehabilitation can promote a review of the policy by the Secretary for Education and even the Permanent Secretary for Education. So this is not something the Commissioner can do. Starting from 1997, the Education Bureau launched integrated education, and students who should study in special schools were sent to mainstream schools. It was a good kind of philosophy because this would help PWDs to integrate into society. However, what is the actual situation? Very often, PWD students would only be isolated and face a lot of barriers in mainstream schools, including in terms of attitude and environment. Some parents said to us that their deaf and dumb children would seem to have disappeared from the class. They could not listen to the teacher and nobody cared. They were bullied against. They had no friends. And teachers in schools also cry out in pain. Some frontline teachers told us that there were 20-odd special education needs children in just one form or one level. For example, AHAD, autistic, physically disabled children, etc., etc. The teacher cannot even keep classroom order. How can teaching be done? In the past, teachers could teach, but now they no longer can teach. And it is very frustrating for teachers. And parents are also discriminating schools that accept students with special education needs. If a school takes on such students, some parents would actually take their children to other schools to avoid being in the same school with these children. And this has affected the education of able-bodied students. But actually, it is a learning opportunity for them if they are in the same class with children with special education needs, because this is what society is all about. However, if they do not receive the right kind of education, they will be bullying against other children, and what they get is negative education. In the circumstance, the policy of integrating education should be a good policy, but then it is a lose-lose-lose situation that has resulted. Teachers stand to lose, students with special education needs stand to lose, and mainstream students lose, and even parents stand to lose. Because what we term as integrated education is something we have high expectations for. It is a project to change the culture in society. If we need to succeed, we need to get everybody prepared. And the investment, the time and energy that has to go into this will also be monumental. In fact, the biggest effect that has been achieved is to cut down on education expenses. And I have evidential backing for this. If we nurture our students in special education schools, the unit cost, if we look at these severely mentally handicapped children, then it would mean $263,000 for one student. For the mildly mentally handicapped, you need to spend $122,500 on them, on one of them. But if they are placed in mainstream schools, the cost would come down drastically. In a primary school, the unit cost for a student with special education need would only be $39,580. Even in secondary schools, the respective cost will just be $45,400. Compared to $260,000 and $120,000, I think this is just a fraction of that cost. In a mainstream school, there are 15,940 such students. If you multiply the unit cost, you will see that the amount is a big one. But the cost is just part of the problem. If we want to provide good integrated education, like Dr. K.K. Kwok said, we need a small class teaching environment. We need to really provide the right kind of support for them, instead of just one education psychologist supporting 7 to 8 schools. We need to allow mainstream school students to be served by language therapists or speech therapists and other professional support. Teachers should also be given better training instead of just 6 weeks of training. And then I'll ask them to tackle every kind of student with special needs. So today we must say that we need to comprehensively review integrated education. Thank you. Mr. Zhang Kwok-chi. Thank you, President. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion is building an inclusive society for all. And in the motion, he asked the administration to implement the obligations under the Convention on the Rights of the PWDs. This motion reminds me of the rehabilitation values in the minds of the administration. If we do an analysis, you will see that the administration doesn't have a clear direction in taking forward rehabilitation. In the 60s and 70s, most countries which were advanced started to develop social welfare, and they also paid attention to the daily living of PWDs, and therefore they came to a rehabilitation value to help the PWDs to integrate into society. Before that, there used to be institutionalized care for PWDs, but then they were subject to a community care mode. And then in the 80s, this came to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong also started to think about non-institutionalized care. And this is what society now does, and that is to confirm the worth of the disabled and also to respect them. Therefore, we started to introduce integrated education in Hong Kong, and also we have supported employment. So PWDs will be helped to work in different jobs. And then in the last 2 decades, we had bumped into problems. Some schools, some teachers actually objected, but then in the last 2 decades, we started to talk about inclusiveness, so that we need to accommodate PWDs with different background. And we think that there should not be behavioral and psychological barrier. In fact, the spirit of such rehabilitation work is to promote equal opportunities. Right now, laws have already been made in overseas countries in order to entrench this. And that is to entrench this basic right of people. Say schools cannot refuse to take on students with special needs. And governments would have to support schools in this initiative. And also, from womb to tomb, PWDs in Hong Kong are discriminated against. They do not have enough services. In 2008, the special nursery centers had a waiting time of 12 months, but this year it has risen to 16.8 months. 1,319 children from the age of 2 to 6 are waiting for such places. Some experts have said that if they are autistic and they have social or interpersonal difficulties, if they are given proper preschool care, there will be a better chance for them to be rehabilitated. The administration has done early intervention work, but then there is no downstream service to complement it. And therefore, the parents and children will see their rehabilitation opportunity go down the drain. In primary and secondary schools, there are not enough places for special education. And just now, Mr. Ip Kin Yun has mentioned this as well. The funding for providing special education does not allow the engagement of enough speech therapists, psychologists, and other professionals. We have been asking for 1 social worker per school, but then it has not been implemented. The unemployment rate of PWDs is always on the high side, but the administration is unwilling to launch a quota system. As for daycare and institutional care, of course, it is inadequate. The waiting line for a placement center was 836 in 2004, but then in 2011 it was 1,106. As for the sheltered workshop, the queue was 1,938 people in 2004, and it jumped to 2,543 in 2011. The administration is moving at a snail's pace to provide places at these centers, and therefore the queues have grown by 30% in a matter of 7 years. And institutional care is, of course, lacking. The queue used to be several thousands, but then the longest waiting time was 14 years. The person involved could only stay at home doing nothing. It was a torture, a kind of torture for this person and his carer. The administration has not defined aging of the PWDs, and therefore, so you do not provide the right kind of services for them. A few years ago, you mentioned WEP and ECP, so people can join these programs. And 60% of the unit cost for other social welfare is provided for such programs, but then you do not provide extra space, and the sheltered workshop would become such a crowded place that these people are just left there doing nothing. So from preschool to education to employment to institution care to care in their elderly years, the administration is only doing a meager job in providing the service. It is taking the role to discriminate against the disabled. The administration must adopt new thinking and face up to rights for disabled people before Hong Kong can have an inclusive society. Thank you.
Mr. Leung. President. In the face of the criticisms leveled against it by the UN committee, I don't know what the administration is going to do. But then actually this administration is dysfunctional, is crippled. If you look at the bureau director, what is he suffering from? He's actually suffering from disabled mentality, because when you ask him anything, he will say that it's working well. All right. When you tell them that several thousand elders are not able to get a place before they die, well, what he would say is that what Mr. Leung, what we've been doing has been very effective. Well, when I was a young child, I was told that well, when you try to make friends, you will have to see how this guy deals with his family member and how he treats his parents and also his pet animals. All right, if he puts up very nice clothing, but then as soon as he gets home, he's another guy altogether. I think this is what this administration is. All right, when it is when the officials come to this council, they would say that everything would be done properly, but then when they go back, nothing will be done to improve the situation. So it's like what I've been seeing in the public housing estate. All right, this is a small school for the disabled, and when they ask for further funding to improve the environment, well, up till now, nothing has come about. All right, I dare not see them anymore. And when I go home, I would try to make a detour in order to avoid confronting them. Because when you ask them, they always say that it's been working well and nothing can be done about it. Please do not forget, Mr. Chung. Well, please take a look at me. Just look at me. We are your boss. So why are you hanging on to the money? From pre-primary education, you have been discriminating against PWDs. And after the introduction of the NSS, the new senior secondary school curriculum, you're not willing to increase funding for them. And just on this issue, I've seen many people cry. And just on this, we tried to approach Mr. Michael Soon, who used to be the Secretary for Education. All right, there was a group of 200 plus petitioners, and he just closed the gate. Nobody was allowed in. He was not willing to see them. All right, you might say that putting up requests would not work. Why are they treating PWDs like that? That's because they do not have any votes. They are not influential at all. You've been treating the unemployed workers very badly, and you've been so miserly about statutory minimum wage. And I've heard many people say this. Elders over 70 have to lie, and they have to struggle as to whether they have to tell lies or else they might not be eligible for the double OAA. And actually, for those without bargaining power, why would you bother to do anything for them? Well, when we tell you, well, I've been protesting for many years. We've been asking for concessionary transport fare. All right, it's like a big boon that you're offering the $2 fare, concessionary fare. So for the officials who are very bureaucratic, and well, it's difficult for you to come to grips of the difficulty experienced by those under 12. They are disabled. So why are they not eligible? Why should they not enjoy the fare? Is it that their fares will be paid for by their adult family members? Is it that when they are accompanied by adults, they are not doing anything meaningful? President, Mr. Matthew Chung, the Bureau Director, when he's in this chambers, every time when we ask him about rights, he'll translate that into welfare issues, and he'll say that we cannot afford it. Every time when we say you need to apply universal values, well, you might be referring to the ISCRA, and it doesn't count because you have not acceded to it. And also for the ICCPR, even then, they say that it doesn't apply to them, and it doesn't have any prevailing power over them. So what are you saying, Mr. Chung? Just let us know what's in your mind. Would you be asking the administration to hire more PWDs in the civil service? Well, how about increasing it to 2%, 3%? Let's just not tell us that it's been working well. Please do not say nonsense, speak nonsense. Can you just tell us? I'll be stepping down, and I'll be turning over a new leaf. So why are you not prepared to increase it to 3%? Why are you not asking the capitalists with means to increase the ratio to 3%? And if they are not able to do it, then they might use alternative methods to do it. Well, SMEs are not able to do it, but how about them? Well, for 433, will you be giving people 3 more years? And also for the higher DA, will you be prepared to increase it? So please do not tell us that it's been working well. Just tell us the answer. Please do not resort to rhetoric or well, this is just a useless government. Actually, you are totally callous. Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, President, everybody has his potential, and I'm sure everybody has his value. But then the thing is, how do we create a conducive environment so that both the able-bodied and the disabled will be able to expound on their potential? And as pointed out in the motion, well, since 2008, the CRPD has been in force in Hong Kong, but then many policies related to PWDs have a lot of room for improvement. If you look at today's motion, last week, I invited the rehabilitation power and I've exchanged views with them. For example, under the existing policy, only the eligible disabled and elders, they would be eligible for the concessionary transport fare. But then the thing is, what's the definition of eligibility? Many who have been assessed as 100% disabled, they will be eligible, but then if they have just lost one limb, then they would not be eligible and they will not be able to benefit from the scheme. And therefore, we should review the existing policy so that the 50,000 people who have registered for the registration card for the disabled, they should also be able to enjoy the fare. Well, for an inclusive society, we should encourage the disabled to come forward to take part in activities, and there should be barrier-free access. But then, if you look at rehab bus statistics between 2008 and 2011, if you look at the telephone booking, the number that has been rejected, well, the number has been steadily rising. In 2008, there was only 10,000, and now is 16,000. So from this, you can see that many who need the service have not been able to book a service. And during the last 5 years, if you look at the fixed route service, the waiting time would on average be half a month to 2 months. In other words, if you want to make a booking for rehab bus, then you will have to do it several months in advance, or at least 2 months in advance. And actually, according to the Rehab Powers chairman, he told me that in arranging for several dozen PWDs to go to another district, they will have to make the appointment several months ago. And recently, even making it 6 months ahead would not do. And therefore, that would greatly discourage people from taking part in activities elsewhere. And also, if you want to book a rehab bus service, you will have to wait for 3 to 6 months. And therefore, for people going to school or going to work, that would be very difficult. And even for those who have managed to find a job, because they do not have any transport service, they would not be able to do it unless their bosses are willing to wait for them for 3 months. Other than going to another district to work or to school, even if you go to a closer district, it would be very difficult. In October 2011, I got a friend who accompanied me to Zhong'an Shopping Center and Yuan's Shopping Center in Manshan, and we conducted a survey. And the report says that even though in these shopping centers there are barrier-free access for the disabled, but then there are many facilities that are not truly providing convenience to the disabled. Well, in English, we say that it's not user-friendly. For example, in lifts, well, yes, there is a voice activator system, and there are also braille taking care of the blind, but then the location might be too high, and as a result, people with disabilities might not be able to press the button. And also in different districts, in particular those wheelchair bound, they have told me that well, in public housing estates and even in private housing estates, when you look at the lift doors, that they would close very quickly, and for the wheelchair bound, they would not be able to rush into the lift before the lifts would close. Well, afterwards, I tried to find out why. If they can close just 2 seconds later, then that would already become barrier-free, and that would be a lot more convenient for them, and they would find it easier to move around. Or if they have difficulty going in and out of their building, how can they come out? In fact, in different districts, there are many places under the law, they've already installed barrier-free facilities, but then in using them, you'll find out that actually it's not really barrier-free. In particular, you might have to cross the road, and you would find it very difficult to go home. So when they try to go out to take part in the activities, if it's so difficult, then how can you have an inclusive society at all? President, I believe that owners, corporations of buildings, well, they should be given technical and funding support. That's very important, because if they are not able to come out of the building, then how can they take part in activities elsewhere? And as the law does not require buildings to provide barrier-free access, and there is no incentive in terms of funding and technical support. And if you can provide such support, and even if you're able to provide 100% financial support for converting the entrance to the building so that they can become barrier-free, and also for the eligibility, if they are linked to CSSA, then many who have the needs, who might not be eligible for CSSA, will not be able to benefit and also get the necessary support. And therefore, I support that we should lower the threshold so that for carers of disabled family members, if they are not able to go out to work, they should be given some support. They should be getting SMW so that they can get the support and their livelihood would not be affected. I understand that many rehab groups also understand this. Well, for the PWDs, if we introduce a quota system, we will need time to foster a consensus in the community, and therefore they would very much like to see tax incentives offered by the administration. For example, if you hire the disabled, then the spending can also receive double tax concession. Then more employers will be more willing to hire the disabled, and also there should be more job opportunity for the disabled. That's very important, and therefore, other than the SWDs, different initiatives, we should have more funding in order to support the rehab groups so that social enterprises can be set up, so that more PWDs can become self-reliant. And if they are able to become self-reliant, that would also help create an inclusive society. These are my remarks. I support the original motion and also all the amendments. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll invite Mr. Leung Yiu-chung to speak on the 6 amendments. The speaking time limit is 5 minutes.
President, first of all, I'd like to thank the 6 members for moving amendments. And if you look at the amendments that they have moved, most of them have been requests that have been made by the disabled groups. And on this occasion, they have moved different amendments, and incidentally, that could also form a roadmap. And if the Bureau Director is willing to pass this on to CY Leung, if he's willing to incorporate this in his policy address, then I'm sure the PWDs will be very happy, because if that's done, then they can have a new life and there will be new hope for them. But then if you look at the overall content, I think there are several areas that leave something to be desired. And I hope that in casting your votes in a moment, and if you support my original motion, I hope that when you cast your vote in a moment, please do not support Mr. Chen Hang-pen. Please do not support his amendment, because there is a very important concept that is different from my original motion. Well, in my original motion, I said that we should expeditiously set up a dedicated committee to promote and give effect to the relevant provisions of the Convention that the SAR government has not yet implemented it. What does he say? He said that we should study it. So he said that we should allocate resources to look into it. But then that would give rise to some problems. Number one, if the administration accepts his proposal, then we will not have any idea as to when this will be done. That would give a lot of room for the administration. It could take a year, 2 years, or even 3 years, and there will be no deadline, and as a result, nothing will come about. And therefore, I don't think this should be supported. And other than the study, other than dragging its feet, after the study, it can decide not to establish this dedicated committee. So on this particular point, that would be very disappointing, because as we have heard from the DAB, every one of them said that they would be prepared to support my original motion. If that is the case, then why do they have to introduce these words, that they would only look into it, that they would only study it? Actually, this is quite a contradictory concept. And therefore, for DAB members, when you vote on the amendment by Mr. Chen Hang-pen, you should vote against it. You should not support it. Or else, if you say that you support my original motion, it's just a lip service. It's not genuine support at all. And also, I'd like to comment on Mr. Michael Tian's amendment. I support him, because if you listen to his speech, you can see that he was very surprised, because he said that upon the implementation of SMW, with regard to the impact on the PWDs, he would like to see some studies on it. Originally, I thought that he was trying to see how SMWs might affect PWDs' job opportunities. In fact, what he was trying to say was that more PWDs should get jobs. I think this is a very good direction. And that would also be in line with what many members have said about the employment quota system. I'd like to comment on Ms. Anne Chiang's remarks. She's not here. But then in her speech, she said that the administration hires about 2% of PWDs in the civil service. Well, this is not true. Why? Out of the 2% for the colorblind, they would also be included. And of course, we can't say that for the colorblind, they are not disabled. Yes, they are still, to a certain extent, disabled. But then we have to hire more people with disabilities so that they will be able to join the labor market. That's why, on this particular point, we're in favor of introducing an employment quota system, and we hope that the quota should not be confined to 2%. We should increase it. As Mr. Leung Yiu-chung said, why not 3% or even 4%? If that's the case, then many PWDs will be able to find jobs, and if they are able to integrate into society, then they'll be able to have a new life, and that would also be good to their rehabilitation. Because as we know, well, if they have something to live for, then they'll be more happy, and that would also be good for their health and also for their physical health. And therefore, in terms of employment, it's not just about making a living. That would also help them regain health. Therefore, I hope that you will support all the amendments except the one moved by Mr. Chen Hang-pen. Thank you.
Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Mr. President, I'm once again grateful to the 10 members who have offered their valuable views. I will briefly give a response to the key points. The member proposed to set up an independent, dedicated committee to promote and give effect to the convention and to monitor its full implementation by the SAR government. I wish to explain that in terms of the monitoring mechanism, the Equal Opportunities Commission, as the statutory and independent body and enforcing this disability discrimination ordinance, have all along been safeguarding equal opportunities for persons with disabilities, PWDs, and protecting their rights under the ordinance. At the same time, the Rehabilitation Advisory Committee, RAC, as the government's main advisory body on the rights and welfare of PWDs, assists the government in promoting and implementing the convention. It has also been playing the important role of monitoring the implementation of the convention in Hong Kong. The RAC comprises the chairman, the vice chairman, and members, none of whom is from the government. They include PWDs of different categories, parents of PWDs, self-help groups, NGO service providers, academics, community, and business leaders, professionals, etc. Official members who are representatives of the relevant bureaus and departments provide the necessary support for the committee and suitably follow up on matters raised by the committee. The RAC, which enjoys wide recognition and representativeness, is the most suitable central mechanism in promoting and implementing the convention. Internally, the Commissioner for Rehabilitation in the government is responsible to the Secretary for Labour and Welfare for the formulation of policy on rehabilitation matters and for coordinating the planning and executive action of all government departments and NGOs in developing and providing rehabilitation services. After the convention takes effect in Hong Kong, all relevant bureaus and departments must ensure that the policies and initiatives under their purview are in line with the spirit and core values of the convention. The Commissioner for Rehabilitation, therefore, plays the role of coordination within the SAR government for the implementation of the convention. Earlier, I also gave an undertaking that pursuant to the United Nations Committee's recommendation, I will review the role and functions of the Commissioner for Rehabilitation, and by next year I will come to a decision. We think that the existing structure is effective in giving effect to, promoting and monitoring the implementation of the Convention in Hong Kong. As I said in the opening address, the government attaches great importance to giving effect to the Convention. The government has continued to allocate additional resources to enhance the support for PWDs to promote a barrier-free, equal, and inclusive society. Obvious progress has been made. Let me share with you the development in some of the key areas. On barrier-free access, we released the latest edition of the design manual, this barrier-free access, in December 2008, which sets down higher barrier-free design standards to meet the needs of PWDs. The departments responsible for designing and constructing government buildings and public housing units have also set up a monitoring regime and implemented policy guidelines to ensure that all newly constructed buildings and any alterations to existing buildings comply with the latest requirements in the design manual released in 2008, or even reaching standards that exceed the statutory requirements. To further step up our efforts, the Hong Kong SAR Government has taken forward a comprehensive retrofitting program costing 1.3 billion Hong Kong dollars to upgrade the barrier-free facilities in about 3,500 existing government premises and facilities, as well as about 240 public housing estates. All government venues which have a frequent public interface have been included in the program. Retrofitting works for around 90% of these venues were completed in June this year as scheduled. For public walkways, the administration announced in August this year that the existing policy would be enhanced and a new lift installation program would be launched to respond to public requests, thereby creating a universally accessible environment in the community to improve the accessibility of the public walkways. The Transport and Housing Bureau has already consulted the panel on transport on the latest development of the new policy and the proposal of a new block allocation subhead for works under the Universally Accessible Program and obtained members' general support. The Transport and Housing Bureau will submit the proposal to the Subcommittee on Public Works in December for discussion. If it is supported by the PWSC, funding proposal will be submitted to the Finance Committee in January 2013 to commence the relevant works as soon as possible. We have also been improving transport facilities for PWDs by closely collaborating with public transport operators. For example, all railway stations will be retrofitted with lifts or direct access link to link the concourse and the ground floor by 2015. All franchised bus companies will install by the end of this year bus stop announcement system with visual and or audio display, and wheelchair accessibility will be provided for these buses in 2015-16. This is the timetable. For PWDs who have difficulties in using normal modes of transport, the administration has been providing full subsidy for operators of wheelchair-accessible rehab buses, which provide point-to-point transport service for PWDs in traveling to and from work, school, vocational rehabilitation training, and social activities. Since 2007-08, we have acquired 28 additional rehab buses, an increase of 28%, so that there are 129 buses in the fleet now. Depending on the demand, we will further enhance rehab bus services and increase its operational efficiency in the future. Apart from improving the hardware of barrier-free access, the administration also improves the software, including daily management of venues, and also to raise the awareness and knowledge of barrier-free related matters. And we have appointed a barrier-free access manager who will be in charge of matters related to barrier-free access. And for every venue and facility, an access officer will be appointed. The administration is also concerned about the accessibility of information and communication by PWDs. We have allocated funding to develop assistive tools and applications to cater for the different needs of people with different disabilities. We have also launched the barrier-free website campaign to promote PWD accessible website designs among the public and private sectors. For example, by the beginning of 2013, next year, all government websites will be upgraded to level AA promulgated in World Wide Web Consortium's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. We will be one of the first places to implement this standard in government websites. On work and employment, this is concern of many members and our colleagues as well. The administration will continue to step up employment support and vocational training for PWDs to assist them in acquiring job skills suited to the market demand and seek suitable employment according to their capabilities. For example, under the Enhancing Employment of PWDs through Small Enterprise Project, through the grant of seed money by the administration to NGOs, the project supports the creation of small enterprises or businesses and direct job opportunities to PWDs to ensure that they can enjoy genuine employment in a carefully planned and sympathetic working environment. PWDs employed by segmented enterprises must not be less than 50% of the total staff size. Over $54 million have been allocated, and the administration has, since the beginning of this year, injected 100 million Hong Kong dollars to extend the funding period from 2 to 3 years. And through various incentive schemes and we raise the public's awareness on this issue. And under the Work Orientation and Placement Scheme, participating employer will receive a financial incentive equal to 2/3 of the actual salary paid to each employee with disabilities during the employment period, with a ceiling of $4,000 per month. Also, we subsidize employers of PWDs in purchasing assistive equipment and altering workplaces to increase the efficiency of PWDs in carrying out their work. Each employer of PWDs can receive up to $20,000 in subsidy. We also provide cash award for mentors to encourage employers in arranging mentors for employees with disabilities to provide on-the-job coaching. Members suggested introducing employment quota system for PWDs. In fact, we have looked into this issue as well. In fact, according to the studies on PWD employment conducted by the European Council and the International Labour Organization in year 2003, the mandatory employment quota system for PWDs in other jurisdictions have not been successful. Some countries have already scrapped the quota system. The major international trend is to enact disability discrimination legislation and implement other measures to enhance the support for PWDs in seeking employment instead of establishing an employment quota system. We're also concerned about the fact that the mandatory employment quota system may make PWDs become deemed as a social burden. It will not be conducive to their integration into the community. And therefore, we think that we should help PWDs to seek suitable employment based on their capabilities. Apart from providing vocational training and employment support, we'll continue to adopt positive measures, for example, awards for good employers, best practices, and offering incentives and assistance for employers in order to create more job opportunities for PWDs. On the other hand, we have all along been concerned about the impact of the statutory minimum wage on PWDs. In fact, the minimum wage ordinance affirms that employees with disabilities enjoy the same protection as able-bodied employees. Under the ordinance, employees with disabilities can opt for a productivity assessment so as to strike a proper balance between wage protection and employment opportunities for PWDs and minimize the impact of SMW on the employment of PWDs. We will continue to closely monitor the actual operation of the statutory minimum wage and the impact on PWDs, and a full review will be conducted 2 years after its operation. The administration also strives to enhance rehabilitation services, including residential care homes, community support services, daycare training, vocational rehabilitation services, preschool rehabilitation, and mental health services to cater for the needs of PWDs and their carers. Over the past few years, we have been increasing the service quotas to cope with the surging demand. We understand that the waiting time is very long, so we have strived to improve the service to shorten the waiting list. I share members' concern in the demand for RCHDs, residential care homes for people with disabilities. Actually, we have been adopting a three-pronged approach in the rehabilitation program plan. Apart from steadily increasing our RCHD service quotas and supporting NGOs in developing self-financing homes, we also facilitate healthy development in the private sector. In November 2011, the administration introduced a licensing scheme for private RCHDs and launched the pilot board-place scheme for private RCHDs to encourage private home operators to raise their standards and increase the supply of subvented places, thereby shortening the waiting time and facilitating more choices to be available in the market. At the same time, we will continue to identify suitable sites for new RCHDs to provide more subvented places. In addition, we have launched a number of people-based new service programs regarding community support services. As members are well aware, we have set up 16 district support centers for PWDs to provide district-based community support services for PWDs and their carers. We have also launched the pilot scheme on home care service for PWDs to provide a package of home care services ranging from personal care, rehabilitation training to healthcare services for persons with severe disabilities living in the community while waiting for subvented places. The Community Care Fund Steering Committee held a meeting today and approved that for low-income earners who rely on breathalyzers or breathing aid, a subsidy will be provided, the amount of $2,000 to $2,500. And on mental health services, we have set up integrated community center for mental wellness in various districts in Hong Kong to provide mental health community support service in a one-stop and integrated mode. We will continue to conduct timely reviews on the operation and demand for these community support services and will further enhance the services to provide adequate support for PWDs and the carers for them to be integrated fully into the community. Public education is also very important. To promote the spirit and core values of the Convention through public education, the Labour and Welfare Bureau has since 2010 increased substantially the funding for public education activities from $2 million to $13 million. For example, we have produced a publicity TV series, A Waller's World, sign language capriccios, publicity theme songs, government APIs, cartoon leaflets of the convention, roving exhibitions, and the Youth Life Education Program co-organized with social enterprises. Apart from a number of territory-wide large-scale publicity campaigns, we've also increased funding for related publicity events run by NGOs and DCs from $1 million per year in the past to $3 million. Additional funding is also provided in terms of enhancing training for civil servants to deepen the knowledge in applying the spirit of the Convention in the day-to-day operation. Some members have suggested reviewing the eligibility criteria for disability allowance, the DA. The DA is a monthly cash allowance under the Social Security Allowance Scheme. It seeks to assist persons with severe disabilities in coping with their special needs. As no contribution is required under the DA nor the means test, the target group is people with severe disabilities which have greater needs. As for the non-means tested subsidy programs offered by the government, for example, the public transport fare concession scheme for elderly and eligible PWDs and travel supplement for PWDs, as well as the MTR's fare concession for PWDs, all are based on the criterion of severe disabilities. Every public policy must be implemented in line with the policy objective. Consideration must also be given to financial and other implications. Extending the DA to disabled people not reaching the level of severe disabilities will involve major policy changes. We need to consider very carefully the relevant policy and supporting measures for other PWDs and to prudently assess the implications on public finance and other aspects. Some members asked about the progress of reviewing the DA system. As mentioned in my reply to a member's written question on the 14th of November, the Social Welfare Department set up a task force in November 2009 to conduct a review basing on the recommendations made by the Ombudsman in the direct investigation report on the granting of DA and processing of appeals by SWD. The task force has revised and updated the guidelines on medical assessments, the medical assessment form and checklist used by doctors in public hospitals and clinics, and the processing flow of various departments and organizations to ensure that medical assessments are conducted in a consistent and objective manner in order to achieve the policy objective of DA. The progress of the task force had once been affected by the judicial review on the DA lodged by an applicant. With closing of the case in mid-July 2011, the task force will complete the remaining work of the review as soon as possible. Basically, the task force has completed its work. Nevertheless, the chief executive, in his election manifesto, proposed to allow PWDs who have lost one limb to be eligible for DA. This proposal will directly affect the eligibility criteria and the applicability of the outcome of the task force's review. So before we decide on how and when to implement the outcome of the task force review, we must consider the implementations in following up on the chief executive's proposal in his manifesto. We will start our work in this regard. A member has suggested conducting a study on extending the so-called $2 concession scheme to children below the age of 12 and to maxi cabs and trams. At present, major public transport operators do offer concessions to children below 12, and children below the age of 3 can ride for free. Nevertheless, we are actively looking into the implementation details of extending the concession scheme to children below the age of 12 with 100% disability and are currently on CSSA and DA. We hope that soon we can come up with a concrete timetable and the implementation details. On extending the scheme to cover maxi cabs, GMBs, the administration keeps an open mind and is working with the sector in studying its feasibility, the technical and detailed arrangements, including the reimbursement arrangements for GMB operators, the technical upgrade of the GMB fare system, and the prevention of abuse. As there are many GMB operators, many of them operating on a small scale, their modes of operation and financial positions may be different. We need more time to study carefully and discuss the technical and implementation details. Now, I'd like to say something about education. A lot of, some members talked about education. In terms of special education, the administration adopts a dual-track approach. For students with severe or multiple disabilities, the Education Bureau will refer them to special schools based on the assessment and recommendations of professionals with the parents' consent so that enhanced support can be given to them. For other students with relatively moderate special educational needs (SEN), the parents can choose ordinary schools for them. According to the DDO, all schools are responsible for enrolling SEN students and provide appropriate assistance to help them develop their potential. On school education, the Education Bureau upholds the 5 basic principles in promoting integrated education: early identification, early support, whole school participation, homeschool cooperation, and cross-sector collaboration. Under these basic principles, the schools are required to provide the most suitable learning environment and make the most suitable adjustments based on the learning needs of students to build an inclusive campus. And the whole school approach to integrated education adopted in Hong Kong is in line with the global trend. In order to look after SEN students in ordinary schools, the Education Bureau has all along been providing additional resources and professional support and teacher training for these schools. In 2011-2012, the additional expenditure in this aspect amounted to $1 billion. The additional resources include the Learning Supplement Grant, $1 million per school, and the Enhanced Speech Therapy Grant, and also the additional teachers to cater for low academic achievers under various schemes. On professional support, apart from offering advice to the relevant schools and students, the Education Bureau will expand the school-based educational psychological service to cover all government secondary and primary schools by the school year of 2016 and 17. Through various activities, the Bureau will continue to step up publicity in order to promote the idea of inclusion. On teachers' training, the Education Bureau rolled out a 5-year teacher professional development framework in the school year 2007-08 so that schools can, in a systematic manner, arrange teachers to study the relevant courses to cater for the needs of the SEN students. We have received positive feedback, and in 2012-13, the schools will continue to provide 3-tier training courses for such teachers so that they can be better equipped to take care of students with different special needs. Mr. President, it is the common wish to build an inclusive society for all. It is also the government's policy objective. And on this front, we would like to thank all sectors for their joint effort. We'll continue to work with the LegCo, RAC, EOC, PWD groups, rehabilitation sector, and various sectors of the community. And on the spirit of the convention, we will further promote the rights and equal opportunities of PWDs and to assist them to actively take part in social activities and be fully integrated into the community so that we have a fully caring, inclusive, and equal society. I so submit.
I now call upon Dr. Fernando Cheung to move the amendment to the motion. Dr. Fernando Cheung, President, move that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion be amended. I now propose the question 2, and that is that the amendment moved by Dr. Fernando Cheung to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion be passed. I now put the question 2 as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is, well, Dr. Fernando Cheung claims a division. The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
開始表決。
Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting is closed. The results are displayed. Those from DFC, 22 present, 24, 1 against, 1 abstention. Those from the GC, 31 present, 34, no against, and no abstention. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Andrew Leung, President, I move that in the event of further divisions being claimed at the meeting in respect of the motion on inclusive society, this Council shall proceed forth with the division after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. I now propose to you the question to you, and that is that the motion moved by Mr. Andrew Leung be passed. Does any member wish to speak? I now put a question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion passed. I order that in the event of further divisions being claimed at this meeting in respect of the motion on building up an inclusive society, this Council shall proceed forth with the division after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. Mr. Wang Kwok, as Dr. Fernando Cheung's amendment has been passed, you may now move your amended version. Chairman, I move that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung be further amended by my revised amendment. I now propose the question to you, and that is that Mr. Wong Kwok Heng's amendment. Please remain silent. I now propose the question to you, and that is that Mr. Wong Kwok Heng's amendment to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Chen Hang-ben, as the amendments by Dr. Fernando Cheung and Mr. Wong Kwok Heng have been passed, you may now move your revised amendment. President, I move that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung and Mr. Wong Kwok Heng be further amended by my revised amendment. As the amendments have been passed for the setting up of a dedicated committee, and therefore Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's query has been addressed. And in my revised amendment, there are 8 points. Elders, including the eligible disabled elders, they should enjoy half fare, and there should also be more barrier-free transport services. And we will also have to expeditiously introduce this universal accessibility program, and we should also introduce or have more communities with barrier-free access, and we should have a 5-year plan, and we should also have more places for residential care homes. We should also offer an allowance for carers of the disabled, and we should increase employment opportunities, and there should also be tax incentive. We should also provide support for social enterprises to be set up for the disabled. I hope that members will support it, and I hope that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung will not say no to this. Right? I now propose the question to you, and that is that Mr. Chen Hang-ben's amendment to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung and Mr. Wong Kwok Heng be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Dr. Kwok Kaki, as the amendments of Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, and Mr. Chen Hang-pen have been passed. I now give leave to you to revise the terms of your amendment as set out in the paper. President, I move that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen be further amended by my revised amendment. I now propose the question to, and that is that Dr. Kwok Ka-ki's amendment to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, and Mr. Chen Hang-pen be passed. I now put the question to as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Ms. Emily Lau, as the amendments of Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen, and Dr. Kwok Ka-ki have been passed, I have given leave for you to revise the terms of your amendment. President, I move that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen, and Dr. Kwok Ka-ki be further amended by my revised amendment. I now propose the question to you, and that is that Ms. Emily Lau's amendment to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen, and Dr. Kwok Ka-ki be passed. I now put the question to as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Michael Tian, as the amendments by 5 other members have been passed, I have given leave for you to revise your amendment. President, I move that Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen, Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, and Ms. Emily Lau be further amended by my revised amendment. I'd just like to explain the highlights of my further amendment. I will keep the original wording, that is, we should review the impact of the SMW on the employment opportunities for the disabled, and necessary wording will have to be changed, and the paragraph would also have to be changed. Other than that, I have nothing further to add. Thank you. I now propose the question to, and that is that Mr. Michael Tian's amendment to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's motion as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen, Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, and Ms. Emily Lau be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, you may now reply, and you have 2 minutes and 8 seconds. President, first of all, I'd like to thank Now TV and iCable for live broadcasting our debate with sign language interpretation. I think this is a very good demonstration, and I hope that will continue in the future. And of course, the first thing that we have to do is for this council to hire sign language interpreters to provide a service before they can do it. And therefore, President, at the Electoral Commission meeting, please discuss it as soon as possible. Can we use some more funds to hire sign language interpreters so that we can provide such service in our future motion debates? At the same time, I'd like to tell the Secretary that, as you can see, all the amendments have been passed today, and I hope that the original motion with the amendments will also be passed today, because we are trying to create this roadmap for the PWDs, and what we are still waiting for is a timetable from you. And what I've heard from you, as Mr. Chen Hang-pen said, now those words have been deleted, and you'll be looking into it. And the most important thing is, it's even worse. That is, you will be studying very carefully. So it's even worse than studying it. So please do it as soon as possible, because we cannot afford to wait any further. So please implement all the amendments and also the proposals in the original motion. Thank you. I now put a question to you, and that is that the motion moved by Mr. Leung Yiu-chung as amended by Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Chen Hang-pen, Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, Ms. Emily Lau, and Mr. Michael Tian be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion as amended passed. Please remain in your seat. The meeting is not yet adjourned. I now adjourn the Council until 11 a.m. on Wednesday, 28th of November 2012.